OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Well, it's obviously Limerick's world and we're just living in it. If you want to celebrate that yesterday, if you want to give out about something, we're here for you today. 087 9180 180. But we're obviously going to be luxuriating in the greatness of this Limerick hurling team. Where are we in the cycle? Are we at the start of the cycle? Are we at the middle of the cycle? Is this the beginning of a long period of domination? What's going to happen? Give us your thoughts on that. Give us your thoughts on how Cork set up yesterday. We'll get into this with James Skehill just after 8 o'clock, and obviously they're going to feature heavily on the performance rankings, which are imminent. 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. It's Eoin with you all the way through until 10 this morning. What did you make of that, Eoin?
It was incredible, absolutely incredible. It was up there with some of the great big performances in a big match from a sporting team ever, really. The initial thought I had at half-time was that this was hurling's version of that Barcelona win against Manchester United in the 2011 Champions League final, when Pep Guardiola's masterpiece was in full display and operating at its highest level. Alex Ferguson after the game said that we've never seen a team like this, and we were powerless to stop them. And I felt that Kieran Kingston was probably in a similar position, where there was a sense of helplessness in that dressing room, but also a sense of admiration at what this team were doing. It is right up there with Kilkenny's performance against Waterford in 2008, and to be honest with you, it has probably surpassed it. It will be very interesting now over the next little while to see how significant 2019 ends up being in the run on this Limerick team. Will that be the thing that actually stops the 5 in a row from happening, or actually will it be an insignificant footnote, and are we actually in the middle of a 5 in a row right now anyway?
Is that the Donegal game for the Dubs? That's the point, I suppose, isn't it? Like,
Correct,
and
yeah.
I suppose with you brought up the Waterford game, people were comparing this match from Kilkenny's run to that level of performance. But what if this isn't the Waterford game? What if this is the Limerick game the year before, where Kilkenny blitzed Limerick in the first half, didn't quite put up that score, and they were still cresting? So maybe the peak of this Limerick team is coming next year. The other thing I think about where Limerick are at the moment is, if you go through the other contenders, how many of them can you make a case for in 12 months' time? Conor McKeown made a great piece. I mentioned this in the show last week. Made a great point about Dublin and Mayo. 2 years ago, after Dublin completely annihilated Mayo, if you had said that Mayo were going to beat them in a championship match, people would have said you were doting. So it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that Cork can come back for this and win. You just would say it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to turn that round next year. Maybe the year after, when the under-20s, who were so impressive during the week, they go from 19 to 21, they go from 20 to 22, and they're backboning that team or they're the ones who are driving standards and training because of the competition. Maybe in 2 years' time, this Limerick team will come off the peak, and that's when we see it. But look at the contenders for next year. So Tipperary need a new manager, Wexford need a new manager. Is it possible that Waterford need a new manager? In fairness, if Waterford do need a new manager, that's because their manager's gone to Tipperary and suddenly he's so good that you would think, right, that's going to keep them at a level that they were at this year. And bear in mind, in the first half, they were so sensational against Limerick that we were like, wow, what's the story of this Limerick team? And Limerick needed an all-time great second half performance to beat them. But they seem to have roused the beast. So that's those three. Are Kilkenny definitely a team in transition, with their, the end of their great team finally coming through? Cork scarred at least next year. Galway, it's hard to know what the truth about Galway is, because certainly they have gone toe to toe with this Limerick team, and that's a while ago now. After that, am I missing anybody?
Well, you're missing Wexford and Clare.
Clare, I'd like to see Clare next year in the heat in an All-Ireland semi-final. So once the Munster games, the Munster round robin is over next year, which, assuming that comes back, let's see that game in Croker and see exactly how that goes. I'm not saying that there's an uncertainty of outcome. You'd still make Limerick 6 to 8 point favourites at the moment, but hurling is definitely outside of Limerick in a state of uncertainty. I didn't include the Dubs there. Obviously, I don't think they're at that level just yet. But again, in 2 years' time, can they put it up to them? Are we shooing Limerick in for next year's All Ireland as well?
I'd always be very wary of ever doing that, of shooing a team in for an All-Ireland. Even within a year, like there have been times when that Dublin team looked totally unstoppable, and in fairness, they were unstoppable for 6 years, but they still got a game in a final in years when we expected them not to get that. Limerick kind of looked like that now. They did something that Dublin have never really done, which is completely pulverise an opponent in an All-Ireland final. I really don't think we've seen a team do that in either coast since Kilkenny in 2008. So that is something that they have, and that is something you can point to and say, well, this is why they're going to dominate next year. I think the tip situation that you mentioned there, you can look at that both ways. You can say, well, there's a little bit of a blueprint for how you can upset Limerick, but in reality what it was that Limerick had a tiny bit of a hiccup for a section of a game, and that's why that game looked like it was maybe not going to go their way entirely. But it's hard to argue against your point that the rest of hurling is in a little bit of a state of chaos. I'm just very wary of writing everybody else off just yet, because there are so many other well-resourced counties with great young players. Next year might be too soon for Cork, but Cork will come, and this Cork team that is going to come through over the next little while will backbone a new Cork that will be good enough to take on a team like Limerick and win All-Irelands. I'm absolutely convinced of that. The questions really within Cork, and we'll get into this into the performance rankings, really surround this current crop, this current management, this current set of players. Next year, the pressure is on this Cork team to prove that those players who are still going to be young enough to play over the next 5 years, the management who will still be eager enough to manage for the next however many years, that they are all up to the task, because there is a golden generation coming through and you cannot screw this up. Limerick have shown the blueprint, and the Dubs were the same. When one golden group of players comes through, if you manage to not screw that up, you can do incredibly special things. And yes, both of those two teams that we discuss have huge advantages when it comes to finance and maybe even population to a certain degree, to a lesser degree for Limerick and Dublin, obviously, but they were still massively reliant on one underage team that was better than all the rest. We're talking about that 2011 minor team for Dublin, which in fairness lost the All-Ireland final, but won the 21s in 2014. The Limerick teams at under 21 level from 15 and 17, it is still two golden generations that we're talking about that backboned this team, and all the resources do help. Of course they do. They make the dice roll in your favour to a certain degree, but it's about not screwing up a golden generation when they arrive, and Limerick have maximised an incredible bunch of players.
I think that we've come to think of that Dublin 5 in a row, 6 in a row team as one team, but they're not. That generation that you're talking about, they're the cavalry for the first group who wins the All-Ireland and gets them over the line for the first time, that has Paul Flynn and Connolly and Philly and that group of players and the Brogans. Yeah, exactly. Like, it is
a completely different team. The 5 in a row Dublin team is different to the initial charge from Dublin, which is your 11 and 13. It coincides with a change in play, the Donegal moment. So you have an amazing manager who is a genius and knows what to do when things start to go wrong, allied with McCaffrey, Fenton, Kilkenny, even players like Cormac Costello, who is on that minor team, Mannion, who is on that minor and under-21 team. Those players are then suddenly coming to a level where they can really impact senior football. And it's just a beautiful marriage of things that resulted in Dublin going on to dominate. It was a reason why Dublin went on to dominate for so long. And Limerick have pretty much the exact same thing. You go back and you look at that 2015 under-21 All-Ireland winning team, and it is basically, if you didn't make the senior level, you were in the minority, and they've come through so spectacularly. So that's why I would give Cork hope, given the week that they've had. Anthony Daly making the point in the Irish Examiner this morning that the minor team that won the All-Ireland on Saturday night is one of the best minor teams he has ever seen, and there is massive hype about the 20s team as well. We know that Cork have started to do things in a way that Limerick have done for the last 10 years in terms of tapping into the resources in the city and in the schools. This will come to fruition eventually, so that is why I'm just a little bit cautious of saying that Limerick are definitely going to dominate for the next few years. No question.
How long though? So
yeah, okay, I think they'll win next year. I definitely think they'll win next year. I do think 2023, I do think we could see a 2-year turnaround from Cork where they could win the All-Ireland, because again, if you want to keep these Dublin comparisons going, let's not forget where Dublin were 2 years before they won the All-Ireland in 2011. Absolutely hockeyed off the field in an All-Ireland quarter-final, and they beat that exact same opposition to win the 2011 decider. Okay, the opposition they beat in that 2011 decider, Kerry, are nowhere near what this Limerick team are in terms of professionalism, in terms of the route that they've taken to dominate their sport. But there is evidence in the past in Gaelic games of a team turning things around pretty quickly if they have the right systems in place. And that is one of the questions that Cork need to ask themselves over the next couple of years.
The age profile of the 2009 team versus the 2011 team for Kerry, though, is the thing here.
True.
Like, the age profile of this Limerick team is still very, very good.
Exactly.
And sorry, the cheat code is the coaching and the management, right? That's the bit that gets them, like... And we'll get into this with James Skehill. Like, what is it that Connacht does, and what is it that Connacht brings, and what is it that the speed of thought that they have? How much of that was down to Cork freezing yesterday? I don't know. That's the other unknowable thing here, is like, how bad did Cork play? How much of that was down to the pressure that Limerick put them under, but how much of it was down to the fact that they're still not quite sure of their own identity? Like, we talked increasingly in the build-up about how Cork were still working their way through games and how they were flaky within matches. In the All-Ireland semi-final, Kilkenny were dominating them for a period of time, and if Kilkenny had been a bit more ruthless, could have put them away. And then they were absolutely unstoppable for a period in that second half where they just went on a run. So that flakiness was there, and Limerick capitalised on it. As soon as they were in any way ponderous or made mistakes, Limerick completely annihilated them. Like, it's the 13th minute, I think, Cork score a point, and it's like, oh, this is going to be good. It's like, it's back to 3 points here. Cork just need to, manage this. And then long puck out, catch, ball into full forward line, pass to Gillette, totally free. And everybody was free. Everybody was completely unmolested from the puck out the whole way, length of the field. How do they manufacture that space? Is that a brain fart or is it genius? And over the winter, all of the best coaching minds in the game are going to be looking at that footage going, how did this happen? Is it just because Cork froze and didn't have a defensive structure and defensive plan that was fit for purpose on the day? Or is it that Limerick are operating at such a high level? I don't know. There was a narkiness about Limerick in the second half that maybe just give you a little pause for concern. Just you think back to the season as it was, and the brawls that were happening in the league matches earlier in the year, they weren't important. People were getting red carded, but there was definitely a little bit of niggle in that team that makes you think perhaps there's something there that some team is going to be able to get under their skin at some point next year. But like, you're clutching at straws here to try and see somebody who can live with what we saw yesterday, which was a signature performance from the team. And when the story comes to be written about this great Limerick team, the one-sided nature of that victory and how easy it was for them to beat one of the superpowers of hurling, to humiliate Cork in the way that they did yesterday. I know you're saying it's easy for teams, or not easy for teams, but teams to have come back from stuff like this. Like, that's a ritual humiliation that Cork have suffered. So is there scar tissue?
There probably will be. It will take amazing work from their sports psychology unit over the course of the winter to actually ensure that this does turn into a positive rather than just allow them to have some sort of PTSD over the next little while. Like, the one thing about this is that, okay, they probably are they a better team than Waterford were in 2008? They probably are, but their performance yesterday and the way they got out of it was maybe with a little bit more credit in the bank than, say, Waterford did in 2008. So if you're going to be on the receiving end of one of these signature performances, like, they do put up 122. Like, I know you're talking about those moments early in the game. Like, they got out into the first water break with 1-6 in the bank, which is not a bad opening tally. But the problem is Limerick had also ripped them asunder. But like 122, like, just looking back through the All-Irelands of the last 10 years, on only 2 occasions have the losing team in the final scored more than that. Now, judging what a losing team scores is a pretty irrelevant statistic, but it
was game over, though. I think I definitely don't think there's any merit in analysing the second half in some ways, because it's literally game over at that point. And Cork didn't do themselves any favour by going for goals straight from the start of the second half, because at that point Limerick are like, okay, grand, we thought maybe you would come with something, but actually if it's pot shots and over carrying into our defence, have at it, lads. And I also think there were times when Cian Lynch tapped one over at one point, as opposed to there's one more pass for goal. They were, I think, in the second half, Limerick were taking it easy on Cork.
Yeah, like I maybe there was definitely that feel that they had taken the foot off the pedal in the third quarter, maybe. But if you want to talk about that edge that Limerick have, like I think it's something we should definitely mention, because that was as interesting as anything else that happened in the second half, when there was that little bit of a melee. It was a definite melee. It was like I actually thought it was going to spill over into something quite significant, because it just kept going and going and going. And there was a number of like different little moments in there where probably learned a bit about Limerick, like Graham Mulcahy snapping a fella's hurley, for me, is the one that stuck out. It's not something that I've seen before. Just looking through Twitter, people who would have a lot more hurling in their blood apparently have seen that thing happen before on the pitch. And I thought that was like, wow, you're 15 points up and you are snapping an opponent's hurley to try and stop an advantage. I'm like, I mean, there is a serious edge that Limerick have, and that you obviously need to win in All-Ireland. And I just wonder, like you said there, could it be something that the opponents tap into over the next little while? Maybe it can be, but it's something that Limerick are definitely using to their advantage at the moment. You don't really mess with them, and they're the aggressor in these sort of situations.
All right. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. James Skehill is going to join us at 10 past 8. We'll do our performance rankings right now. We've got Sarah Donovan at 8:40. We've got Limerick Reaction at 8:50. We have Ronaldinho's buddy Paul Walsh at 9 o'clock. Mark Lawrenson at 10 past 9 to look back on a pretty interesting weekend of Premier League action, which might have flown under the radar for those of you who were consumed by the All-Ireland hurling final yesterday, and more reaction from the weekend coming your way at 9:30 as well. At 7:46 this morning, it is time for the performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Boom.
No prizes for guessing where we're starting in the red this morning. It's going to be with the Cork hurlers, unfortunately. We're going to get into the Nice fans as well before we're done with the bad, and then we're going to get into the hurling championship as a whole, which is probably in amber and probably in a grand place, which we'll get into, and then Shane Duffy and Limerick in the green. So Kieran Kingston, after the game yesterday, described this as like trying to stop a tide with a bucket, and he's not wrong. It's a good quote. There's just a number of different things that you could touch on with regards to how this Cork performance broke down. For me, I think it was laid bare in that full back line on both sides of the ball. First of all, the amount of space that the Limerick hurlers had, which isn't necessarily the full back line's fault, but it certainly created the conditions for them to get torn apart. And yes, of course, you'd like for better one-on-one defending from your full back line at inter-county level, but the conditions were there for them to get totally destroyed. But secondly, when they were in possession, they really looked like the occasion was getting to them. The short puck out completely broke down, because it seemed that their first touch had completely broke down. And I'm not sure what you even do if you're in Cork's position at that point. How do you deal with not a systems failure, but a skills failure at certain points in the game? Yes, Limerick were amazing, and this is mostly about Limerick, but there were some moments in that first half. After a good first quarter from Cork, we were like, God, things have completely shattered inside themselves here. And I think that is a big part of how Limerick managed to rack up such a gigantic score.
I think that it's a complete systems failure, and it'll be very interesting to hear what the analysis is like as people start to parse the video and work out the stats. The Limerick's success on their own puck out was phenomenal. The rate of success and just how effective it was. They could go short, they could go long, and it seemed to work almost all the time. And let's face it, if you're going to win an All-Ireland against a great team, you need absolutely everything to go well. You need to put them under pressure. It's funny, because in the first 15 minutes, actually, there were a few bits where there was a few Limerick lads being hounded, and there was 2 or 3 Cork players together. But what would happen is, whenever there was a mistake made, or whenever there was a little bit of pressure felt, a score would happen. A Limerick score would happen. And so Limerick were obviously able to deal with whatever was happening, and that just, you saw the confidence drain out of Cork. Cork tried a few long balls into the Limerick full back line in the first 15 minutes as well, and every single time somebody from the Limerick full back line came out with the ball fairly easily, it was like, well, that's not working. What other plans do we have? Oh, look, they've scored another goal. I don't know. I think it's definitely, you can see the full back line being exposed, but the full forward line, or whoever is supposed to put the press on, that, you know, there's supposed to be a reason for that, and it didn't work.
Yeah, and like it was definitely very noticeable as well that if you look at the other full back line, which was Limerick, so they were just gobbling up Cork, and Route 1 then had to be an option for Cork because the plan B wasn't working either. But that one was just never going to work the way Limerick were playing. One of the interesting moments for me in the first half, and I can't remember who got the score here, but it was like when Robbie O'Flynn burst through like a bit of a pinball, and he bounced off about 4 or 5 different Limerick men, eventually managed to hand pass the ball back to his teammate, and the ball is put over the bar. And I was like, Robbie O'Flynn right now, for earning an assist, has just been through the ringer, and he is absolutely shattered. He has managed to somehow hold on to possession. There's an incredible bit of play, and they've managed to get a point out of it. And I was like, that is the level Cork need to get to in order to create a point-scoring opportunity in this game.
So I'm just looking at the examiner here. I'm almost certain that Jack O'Connor scores that, and that makes it a 1-point game, and that's 1-5 to 1-4. And you're thinking, right, they're in this now, and look, they're fighting for everything. It's that puck out that leads to the Galan goal. So as soon as that happens, and I think you're dead right. It's like, in a way, that's the end of the game, because that's the bit where it's like, oh my God, look what they can do to us.
But it does seem to be the only way that... So you mentioned there, long ball was not working. What are you going to do? You then have to start running the ball. You have to start getting the ball into maybe the middle third and get runners off the shoulder. But we see what happens then when you do that. So the traditional plan A or plan B, neither of those two things really work against Limerick, because they have answers to both of those things. And I think there's been a growing appreciation. And I think that Limerick's midfield is getting to the stage now where they've been called underrated so much that they are in danger of being overrated at some point. It seems that in every single game you've got William O'Donoghue and Darragh O'Donovan just being lauded, and rightly so. And it is players like that mean that when you are trying to run through the lines, you are absolutely shattered.
They were sensational.
They were absolutely sensational again. When you get within an arse's roar of the Limerick goal. So
here's the thing, right? As well, like at the match, it's very clear that they're in the final 20 minutes that there appears to be a difference in the conditioning of the two teams, because Cork look like they're out on their feet. Now, I presume there isn't. I presume that at inter-county level, actually, all the teams are relatively close to being as fit as one another. I mean, am I wrong about that? You would assume that the science behind getting someone up to peak fitness, and like, you know, there's people with PhDs who are involved in building these strength and conditioning programs. It's just that the physical toll that it takes to play against Limerick is obviously so high that players who are fit are out on their feet because of what they have been put through. And that point that you're making about being put through the ringer for everything, because there was a point in the second half where actually the full forward line essentially had been subbed off, or it looked like Kingston and Horgan had been withdrawn, and there was 3 subs on, and they were hassling and harrying at the puck out. This is the Cork team late in the second half. Game's completely dead, so of course they are. And there was energy about that press that hadn't been there in the first half. But there was also a period in the second half where somebody won a ball out in front of us. We were at Lawro Cusack in the Cork side, and he just needed a runner. He just needed someone to go inside him. But whoever it was just completely shattered, that they didn't have the energy left to go and create a bit of space. And at that point, you're in traffic and there's 3 Limerick lads around you, you get swallowed up and the ball gets cleared. So they were playing as individuals at that point, and I think they've been playing as individuals essentially since the 15th, 16th minute. But it did appear as if there was a difference in strength and conditioning, and that doesn't make any sense, right?
No, it doesn't. And if we want to talk about trying to not screw up a golden generation of players, and that needs to be the number one question that they ask themselves, is there actually a good enough programme there for the Cork young hurlers to turn into the monsters that the Limerick hurlers currently are on a physical level, because that is now the base that you need to be at in order to be competitive at this level if you want to win any All-Irelands. And then you just got to hope that the talent holds up and they get even better and turn into brilliant hurlers at that level too. So I think really yesterday was almost vindication for people who might have rated Galway quite highly over the last few years, because they have been the team, other than Limerick, who've been comprised of man mountains all across the pitch, and that have been able to maybe go toe-to-toe physically with them and with other teams. And it is that sort of contender at the moment that looks like they'll be best placed to topple Limerick, whereas Cork maybe possibly, and I don't know, but like maybe they're the second best team in the country hurling wise, but physicality wise it doesn't look like they are. And it's interesting that you say that, having been at the game as well.
Sorry, last point on this, because we've got to move on, but you're right about the hurling. The skills deserted Cork yesterday. Their passing went to ground, their pickup was slow. Like, is that the occasion getting to the team? Is it just an uncertainty about their identity and what they're trying to do? They're the answers. They're the questions that if they get the answers to, they can make a quick comeback from this. But if they don't get the answers to it, and if there's doubt, and if there's, I don't know, it'll be very interesting to see what the winter is like in Cork after an All-Ireland performance like that. You would hope that management team stays intact and comes back and is able to absorb the lessons from what happened. But we know historically that's not always the case. After a beating like that, you get in trouble. Just a reminder, every Monday morning here on OTB AM, we give you the chance to win a Gillette starter pack. All you got to do to enter is get in touch with your suggestions for the performance rankings. Who do you think should make the good, the bad and the meh? Tweet us at Off the Ball AM, WhatsApp 0879 180 180, or enter on our Instagram stories. What's next?
Joe Mason has been in touch to say, lads, stop talking about Cork. It's all about Limerick performance. The players hit near perfection. This is the performance rankings where we do the bad, the grand, and then the good. So
did they hit near perfection? That's the other question. Like, so I think that they could. I think that they could improve in that performance. I actually think that the wides, you know, like, is Kyle Hayes going to miss many shots again? Probably not. I definitely think that they could get better. That's why I don't think this is their 08 performance. I think this is closer to the 07 performance, where there's still room for them to get better, and that's why I am shooing them in for next year's All Ireland.
The other thing in the bad this morning in the red is the Nice fans. We'll just touch on this very quickly. If you missed this last night, Dimitri Payet was hit on the back of his head with a bottle from supporters, and the supporters probably weren't expecting justice to be meted out. Justice being Dimitri Payet picking up the bottle and throwing it back into the stands when all hell broke loose. The Nice fans essentially invade the pitch and a massive brawl breaks out. One of the Marseille assistant coaches wearing an orange bib rushes onto the pitch and decks one of the Nice supporters. You've got Jorge Sampaoli, who's the Marseille manager, utterly enraged by the whole thing. He's being held back by Payet, by other people involved in the camp as well. Furious that his players would be subjected to a projectile being thrown onto the pitch. This is not the first time that we've seen crowd trouble this season in a game involving Marseille this season. A couple of weeks ago on the opening night of the season, Marseille versus Montpellier had to be temporarily stopped due to missiles being thrown onto the pitch. This time though it went way further and the fans came onto the pitch and the game was abandoned rather than just being stopped temporarily. It was the fact that the Nice players came back onto the pitch and were willing to resume it, and then Marseille basically didn't show up for the resumption of the game. That led to it being called off, which usually leads to the team who didn't show up getting having to forfeit the game. But I would be astonished if that was actually the case. This was an just on Twitter last night, Kevin Kilban was tweeting about projectiles onto the pitch, and I'm not sure if you remember this. I certainly don't. The 2003 game against Georgia.
Oh yeah, knife.
Yeah, knife. And there was a 42 article shared as well, where he said, I was hit with a knife. It was funny at the time. Something just hit me on the shoulder. I looked down and it was an open flick knife, which I actually don't recall. And the Guardian's report of the game describes how Lee Carsley and Damien Duff were caught in the head by plastic bottles, and Gary Breen was hit by a ball bearing. Glass smashed against the frame of Shea Given's goal, and the bottle narrowly missed Gary Doherty after his late winner. It's something we see so often, where a player goes over to take a corner or something and there's just projectiles flying everywhere.
Yeah.
You can dig this out on social media. Like, it looked like a bad old hit that Payet took in the back of the head, and like, you never want to enrage a fan group, but I can completely understand the fury that would be inside you to say, screw you, I'm throwing this plastic bottle back at you. And clearly the Nice fans just looking for a fight if they respond to that by running onto the pitch.
It's Marseille versus Montpellier and Nice versus Marseille. It's like these people living in this kind of island or Mediterranean paradise, and the pent-up anger coming from something or other. It's I just assumed that everybody on the Côte d'Azur would be, you know, high in the hog of life, but it turns out that's not the case. It's 7:58. Let's go.
The hurling championship is in the grand. We've kind of touched on this already, because you're making the point that all the other elite counties maybe are in a state of flux, or there is certainly questions to be asked about all of those other counties, and the only county with a real sense of certainty going into 2022 is Limerick, and that's a pretty scary prospect.
The parade yesterday was as exciting a moment as I've had at a sports match, because it really felt like there was going to be a classic unfolding. And when Shane Kingston's goal went in, the stadium rolled, because it was like, oh, this is great, you guys have scored an early goal, but we've got right back at you, and this is going to be a classic. And then as Limerick dominated, the Limerick crowd went absolutely feverish for that first half, but the second half atmosphere was pretty flat, because Limerick were essentially celebrating, and it was that kind of weird suspended animation where you know you're going to have a wild 24, 48, 7 weeks, however long it is that Limerick are going to celebrate, and they deserve to celebrate. But we do need uncertainty of outcome for things to be classics. And at the moment, I don't think there's any uncertainty of outcome. You know, just saying that next year's hurling championship, we all better be careful what we wish for. We need a rival. Limerick to be cemented as a truly all-time great team. I mean, they might do 5 in a row here, but they could do with a rival along the way just to kind of have some classics where we get to see them put to the pin of their collar.
Yeah.
And look, maybe it is Tipperary. Maybe that's what's going to happen. They will go massively down in games and then they will beat you. And that game, when we come back to look at the history of this Limerick team in future years, is going to be the one where it's like, okay, and they are the rival for the next few years. And maybe, you know, Liam Cahill takes that new team and it's his underage teams coming through to backbone that side, and it's a few of the older lads who have 2 or 3 All-Irelands in their back pocket who are peppered through that as opposed to the other way around. And that's what we need to happen. So, but none of the rest of the contenders, I think, can live with that team. Eddie Brennan tweeted yesterday, thank God Kilkenny were bet in the semi-final. Or was it Eoin Larkin? Sorry, it was Eoin Larkin tweeted that.
Interesting.
It is, isn't it? Like,
I think it's the final that a lot of us maybe would have wanted before the season. We wanted to see the rematch of 2019, but I think that they've just gone to another level since then, since COVID. And the 2020, 2021, they've just been just ridiculously dominant. It is, like, there is nothing better. So the reason why it's in the amber, by the way, the hurling championship, is that, yes, you do have an all-time great team and we should enjoy this, but also it does diminish the entire competition. But there is nothing better in sport than seeing one of these all-time great teams getting pushed to the pin of their collar.
That's
and that goes for those Kilkenny Tip games and those Dublin Mayo games.
Exactly. They were the best games that we've ever seen.
So this could go from grand to the good if there is a proper contender over the next little while.
Yeah.
In the good, just to give a quick mention to Shane Duffy before we finish up on Limerick. He scored against Watford at the weekend and has had a pretty good start to the season, I think it's fair to say. The Ireland squad is getting announced on Thursday. Stephen Kenny was at the game, Brighton and Hove Albion game against Watford at the weekend, was chatting to himself and Aaron Connolly after the game.
Connolly came off the bench.
Connolly came off the bench and missed an absolute sitter. Like we could have been sitting here this morning. Maybe absolute sitter is a bit harsh on him, given the ball came to him at a bit of pace, but we could be sitting here this morning saying that there was 2 Irish goal scorers for the one team in the one game, and maybe that happens before the year is out, because Shane Duffy looks like his Republic of Ireland of old, where he is a really big goal threat. And there was another corner that came late in the game where you're like, Shane Duffy's going to score again here. From Kenny's perspective, Duffy is playing in the middle of a back three. From Ireland's perspective, by and large, the back three has been almost like the silver bullet for all our ills over the next little while. And all of a sudden, Ireland's best centre back is looking like his old self, but playing in a system that actually could get the best of this current Ireland crop. So I'm optimistic, but Portugal is coming, and maybe worse than that, Azerbaijan and Serbia are coming. So Ireland squad announced Thursday. Shane Duffy very much in the green, and brilliant to see him back playing so well. The good, and I mean, it's going to be Limerick hour now for the next little while. We've spoken a lot about them at the top of the show already, but there really aren't enough great things you can say about this Limerick team when it comes to the bunch of players that they have and also the management that they have. I don't think many of us expected the Kilkenny greatness to be matched so soon after that great Kilkenny team. Like you mentioned there, that we're still talking about the dismantling of that team to a certain degree. There are still the very last wisps of that team still hanging around, and of course Cody is still going, but to see a team I would say match what they're doing and possibly even surpass it over the next little while is absolutely extraordinary. And I mean, we've spoken about the Limerick edge and what they bring to proceedings that makes them winners. At the same time, when you listen to someone like John Kiley speak after the game, you just feel thoroughly delighted for the man. He just seems like just a really, really good human being. And the Limerick players obviously are blessed by the fact that they are so talented and are so brilliant, but I think they're extra fortunate to have him as a leader, like steering the ship in the right direction, and all the different people he's brought around him, which just makes this beyond the benchmark that everybody must reach.
Yeah, sensational performance. 41 points, 332 in an All-Ireland final. They are the greatest at the moment, and they have the potential to be the greatest team of all time if things don't derail them, and that's a conversation we're going to be having in just a couple of minutes' time with James Skehill. If you've got views on Limerick, let's hear them. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Of course, you can always get us on the YouTube stream, which is probably the best place for people to watch us these days, and of course you can tweet us at Off the Ball AM as well. It is this week's performance rankings in the bag.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
Right, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to be back with hurling with James Skehill next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Football Pod with Paddy and Andy, our new weekly Gaelic football show with Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran.
The guy from Ballinrobe came down and sat beside me. He said, I'd take the draw, and I said I'd go home. I said, no. I said, this is the time. I said, if we're going to do it, now is the time, and you could sense it. Robbie, I could honestly say, is probably the best teammate I've ever had in my whole career. Like, I know I got caught badly jumping up and down like a fool in the stand. Some of that was for Mayo, but some of that was for Robbie.
Download the OTB Sports app and subscribe to the GAA podcast feed now.
Get ready for the new season with Now.
The Premier League at its best.
Stream moments of pure magic. Sensational strikes.
It's an absolute stunner.
And unbearable tension.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Stream every live game with the world's best, now half price for 3 months.
Take your seat. You'll be on the edge of it for much of the time.
Offer ends September 5th. 18 plus content streamed via internet.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
At 6 minutes past 8, it's time for us to put some meat and drink on the bones of what happened in the All-Ireland hurling final yesterday. I'm delighted to say James Skehill is with us. James, good morning to you. How are you?
How are you folks? Are you well?
How did Limerick create the space they created? What was it that they did that prevented Cork from being able to mark them? Is it down to Cork? Is it down to Limerick?
It's down to both, really. I think Cork were quite. They probably had in their heads that they're going to follow certain people, and try and nullify them man to man as opposed to playing his own defence and trying to cut out ball. But that happened early, and what you saw then was Morrissey and Hegarty, and they were just moving with freedom to go where they wanted to go. Case in point was Hegarty's, where he showed up for both of his goals. Like, he showed up on the opposite wing to where he usually is, and like that's terribly difficult as a defence to manage. And if you're kind of pre-programmed, to play in a certain way, then trying to adjust is hugely difficult. And there was a massive amount of damage during the first 15 minutes. But then you have to also consider that Limerick's game plan and the way they operate is so in sync, that their creation of space is actually second to none. It's incredible. And that huge kudos to the likes of Paul Connerk and John Kyler, who were able to implement that and get the players to execute that on the day of the game. But it looked like a massacre in the first 20 minutes, because you could see, as a hurling person, the creation of space was just going to be a recipe for disaster for Cork, and they couldn't manage it. But then you look at Cork's body language as well, and in particular the two goals, that there was no pressure applied, real pressure to apply to Hegarty coming through, especially from the likes of Rob Downey, who was big and physical and should have really closed space to Hegarty instead of inviting him on. You invite someone like him on at pace, you've absolutely no chance to stop him or even to slow him down. You have to go meet him and cut off his angles, cut off his space. So I think it was a combination of both, George, to be honest.
The second Limerick goal in particular, it comes after a point from Cork, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier on. It was a hard fought, hard won point, gets the crowd, the Cork crowd going, because they're back to a point behind. But it's a puck out, caught uncontested, passed into the full forward line uncontested, laid off to Gallan, who's totally free, back of the net. And essentially that was the ball game right there, because there was Cork could not come back from that, and the body language thing happens there. How does that happen from a puck out?
I agree. I think so. Like, I'd say there was probably an assumption on behalf of Cork that the puck out wasn't going to come 100 yards, so they probably were going to leave unoccupied the space, to say in the full back line, and say leave it for 2-on-2 for a moment, and then try and win primary or secondary ball on the half back line. And that didn't happen. When you allow a half forward line, especially Limerick, especially the players with Limerick, and who they can feed off each other with simple passes. So when you allow a half forward line to win primary possession, you're in trouble. You're in serious trouble, because what you've got oncoming runners straight away to take the ball. So that one pass you talked about, you're like, when that pass is given, 9 times out of 10 the Limerick lads are in a couple of yards of space, which is enough for the guys inside to time their run, to confuse the Cork full back line a bit, and then create space. And that sounds quite simplistic. It sounds like that you'd nullify it quite easily, but in practice it's extremely difficult. So that the first thing that the Cork had to do was get the ball to ground. I wouldn't even contest the ball with Limerick forwards. I just wouldn't. I would just stay. I wouldn't even put my hand up to catch it. I would just bring the ball to ground and try to create some rooks, and then create a line of defence behind you. Because when you try to go contest and they win the ball off you, there's, as I said to you, they're so in sync. They have such an amount of off the shoulder runners, at pace, it's a huge thing to try and stop, and no team has done it so far. And when you look at if you look at the snapshot, just the snapshot of the moment that Flanagan gets the ball, there is literally 40 square yards around him where there's no Cork defender. That for me is criminal. I just think that when Cork were under such pressure there for that 10-minute phase or 8-minute phase, they had to put back an extra body and just stop the rot. And that comes into in-game experience. That comes to probably being exposed to those big games and being exposed to playing teams of that magnitude on a regular basis. So that's not going to come today or tomorrow. But I think there's huge learnings for Cork in that.
That is the type of thing that we have to give Limerick a lot of credit for as well. There was one last thing about this before we get into some of the other things, is that by the middle of the second half, it looked like Cork were out on their feet physically. There's no difference in the strength and conditioning between these two teams, is there? Scientifically, I'm really interested in this, because we assume that everybody's on strength and conditioning programs for the last number of years, and so they're all at a fairly similar level. But it certainly seemed like there was a difference yesterday.
There is, I would say, there's probably no difference in the type of training. There could be a difference in the volume or magnitude of training, and there's also a difference in how long each team has been exposed to that type of training. So I remember playing a challenge game against Limerick last year, down in Limerick. It was just right before we were allowed to get going again, and we were shaking hands after the game. We was over, and I was walking up, and I walked through a straight line heading towards the far goalie, and I met O'Donovan and O'Donoghue, and I met Hegarty, and then I got to Dan Morrissey. And I remember finishing off with Nicky Quaid, and I said, "Geez, Nicky, you're the smallest of everyone here." They were absolute, and I can't stress this enough. They're a rugby team. That's what they are, a rugby team. Dan Morrissey is built like Dennis Leamy. You know what I mean? That's the way he is like. And I think there's a huge difference in the SNC in the sense that where they are in the progression, they have a lot more done than Cork have, obviously. But there's also, strength is one thing, Ger, the conditioning is another thing. Limerick are extremely fit, that's fine, but they're never injured. I never see a guy with a hamstring injury or a quad injury or, dead legs or anything of the sort. So they're conditioned to take the heat for every championship game. And that just brings me back to what I discussed last week or the week before. That's their training. That's their training games inside, that they have literally knocked each other so hard and conditioned each other so hard that they can take anything on a match day. That's probably a bigger point, is it's one thing being strong and doing the exercises and whatnot and, being agile and mobile, but can you be conditioned for the intensity of battle? And as you go on in the championship, the intensity increases and the training volume increases. And, nearly a key thing for a player, 50% of it all is, can he stay fit? And Limerick are always fit. It's amazing.
Why have they managed to open up that sort of a gap then on that level? Like, you would have thought that there are other counties that are very well resourced. There are other counties that have even more years of doing the training at senior level. So do you have any insight into why what Limerick have done has been so much more effective to what the other counties have done?
Yeah, I think something struck with me before. Pat Lamb gave us a talk before in Galway, and he said that amateur teams are always trying to obtain professionalism, and professional teams are always trying to get back to nearly amateurism, connect with communities and connect with people. I look at Limerick and I just think they have an absolutely perfect balance in between, if that makes sense. So the perfect balance of professionalism. So they're backed at board level. The clubs are in symmetry. All the guys on the team, let's say, have a common goal and are heading the one direction. There's no egos in management or players alike, and they're nicely resourced from a financial perspective. So when you put those five together, it's strong. Then you look at their connection with their supporters. And I looked over, I don't know why I was on LinkedIn last night, but I looked over LinkedIn and I saw all the well wishes from their professional careers and companies they're working with, and it screamed of a huge connection, and when a team is successful, nearly everything has to go well for them. So you have to prepare well, play well, and get a bit of luck for a successful team. Preparation is 90% of that, you could say, because it's something you do the most. And I look at Limerick, I just think they're streets ahead. Like my own county, I named 5 points there on the team side of things. We probably have 2 out of 5. You know what I mean? That's decisive. Unless you've got everything, all your ducks in a row, you're going to struggle against Limerick, because when you mix all those items, those tangibles, and then you put the quality of player, that you have together, you've got a huge recipe for success. I was taking some notes after the game yesterday, and I wrote down 6, and here like six of Ireland is easy for this group. You know, they've got 3 in 4 years, but definitely going to get another one. Like, I can't see anybody stopping them next year. And then, like,
we were talking about that, right? Because, like, they need a rival at this stage, and just looking through how they beat Cork by 8 points in the Munster semi-final. They beat Tip by 5 in the Munster final. Then they beat Waterford by 11, and they just won an All-Ireland final by 16 points. It's a sensational level of progression through the championship, with the one potential caveat being the first half against Tipperary, which, if we're again clutching for straws here, could tip under Liam Cahill next year with their All-Ireland under-20 team backbone on the sides. Is there something?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, Les, because, like, again, I keep talking about the experience is one thing, but the group being together, Limerick, they're at a level, let's say, where they have their system and their game plans have been tried and tested on numerous occasions. They've been together in probably something like, when you consider over the last 4 or 5 years, Les, they've probably been together for somewhere in the region of 350 to 400 training sessions. So you've got a volume of work put together there with that group. And now you're asking the likes of a Tipperary team, who essentially would be under somewhat of a semi-rebuild, if we're honest, that you're trying to get them to take them on. So the minutes aren't there in the training field. The quality is probably there in the person. It's definitely probably there on the management side of the view. It's probably there on the individual skills of the player. When you piece all that collective together, taking down Limerick is not just one moment of brilliance. It's the sum of all parts. Like, that's why you look at Cork yesterday, you're depending on Hoggy, you're depending on Jack O'Connor. When you're depending on individuals against Limerick, you're played. It's a full symmetrical team effort that's going to take down Limerick.
What would have happened if Gillette had been sent off in the match against Tip? Would they still have won that game?
Oh, no change. No change. I'm convinced of it, I'm absolutely convinced of it. I watched the Sunday game last night, and, like, they had Gillette, and this is no disrespect to him, like, he's top class. They had Gillette in the Sunday game team of the year, and I was thinking, no, like, he wasn't. Like, I think Gillette and Seamus Flanagan and Peter Casey, with the greatest respect in the world now, this sounds bad, are the product of the system, So I think, like, how many opportunities do they forge themselves? A few from turnovers, that's fine, I respect that. But 9 times out of 10, that ball is bounced into space for Seamus Flanagan or Gillette to come onto, and they whip around over the bar. So, like, the likes of their influence on a team is not as great, from anyone from 5 to 12, in my opinion. So if you could take someone like a Pat Ryan, put him in the Gillette role, he mightn't be as efficient on the scoring or the frees, but he'll still do the job that they want him to do. You can take a Graham Mulcahy role and put him in there. So his level of importance is not understated in Limerick, but I don't think it's as grand or vast as others.
Why did Cian Lynch thrive so spectacularly yesterday, James?
Oh, jeez, yeah, that is a great question. Here's the number for you, right? So Limerick have scored 8 goals and 108 points in this year's championship. Cian Lynch has assisted 29% of that.
Wow.
Like, when you consider, okay, like, of those 108 points, you're probably having the region of 20% frees, okay? Maybe 15-20% frees. So he's just assisted now, not what he scored. He scored another 35 or 6%, you know what I mean? But so one player has almost a third of the influence of the team. So when you put those numbers into perspective, there's no player ever like that has been. Obviously, you have players who have scored. Now, I'm not counting free takers here. I'm counting guys from open play who will assist. There's been no player in recent memory in the last 2 or 3 years, definitely 2 or 3 seasons for sure, that has had the level of influence for him. I think he's in. I don't know the man personally, but from the outside looking in, you think he's just a very free spirit. He's a very, kind of, I'd say, happy guy. Doesn't get I wouldn't say he gets too worked up. I'd say he doesn't get too over-focused on the game. He plays with a level of freedom that most players, 95% of players, would only wish to get to. So 95% of players will play with a level of some slight restriction on games, whether that be through nervousness or that be through, let's say, fear of losing or fear of their marker or wherever it is. But I just look at Cian Lynch and think he doesn't actually care who he's marking, where he's playing, like what conditions he's playing in. He's always going to thrive. And like when you put the biggest player on the biggest stage and he thrives the way he did, it's awesome. I actually can't think of a word to describe the man. He's just at a level that is unattainable for others for years to come.
You mentioned there a moment ago that Aaron Gillette and Seamus Flanagan succeed so much because of the system. So is Cian Lynch an exception to the system, or is his brilliance thoroughly planned throughout Kinnerk and Kiley's system as well? How do those two things tally?
I'm glad you actually asked that, Rowan, because like when I was talking about Gillette and I was talking about Flanagan, let's say, I was kind of putting their level of influence was probably 7.5, 8 out of 10 because of the system, and the rest was themselves individually. You look at Cian Lynch, right? He wins the world of dirty ball. So like from a systematic perspective, his influence is probably only done 4 or 5 out of 10 because of it, you know. And the rest is himself creating. Like how many times does he go in and tap the ball off the ground and get it? Go into a ruck, roll it and get it out, you know, or take snapshots in huge traffic with an awful lot of pressure around him. So I think there probably is I would strongly assume that the likes of Kylie and Knock would say, right, we need to get our best players on the ball most often because those players influence the ball best. You know, so like I know that, let's say from a goal perspective, if we had David Burke on the ball in possession, you know, 13 or 14, 11, 12 or 13 times, he would make a great influence. And I think in the final, again, semi-final against Tipperary, he's something like 20 possessions. And look at the influence he had. But the same thing goes for Cian Lynch, you know. When you get him, the more time you get Cian Lynch on the ball, the more damage you can do. And the case in point is the percentage of assists I just spoke about a moment ago. So if you get him on the ball, chances are 1 in 3 possessions, he's going to create a score for you or score himself. So I think there's a collective understanding from the management team, get Cian on the ball, but then you can't underestimate his quality to get himself. You know, I'm laughing here because he's so good, like, you know, it's just, I'd make you sick.
Can we talk?
But like, do you know about, just about Carl Knock? Interestingly, I was texting one of the previous Clare player last night, and I just had to ask him. I just said, is Knock as good as everyone says? And this is the message. He goes, yeah, he's unbelievable. Trust me, he was brains behind everything. He's a professional coach in amateur game, no ego, completely a pairs man. Biggest loss we've ever had. That's from a previous player. That's the effect he's had on a player in Clare. I won't name the player, but you can see the effect that person, a singular person, has, and what he is perceived to be from a previous player. You know, so when you mix that with the quality of players they have, sure, look, log in and go home.
I was at the game, so I didn't see the TV coverage, but apparently they were oohing and ahhing about something that happened after the second water break, that they were saying, oh, that's got Connacht's fingerprints all over it. I don't know if it was a simple move where everybody was, where the vast majority of the team went out one way to the sideline, Cork followed, the Red Sea parted, literally and metaphorically, and a scoring opportunity came straight off a puck out.
Yep. And tell you one thing, Ger, I've been behind that. That has happened to me in the goals. When you look at 3, 4 Limerick forwards moving to your right and a midfielder going with them, you're saying, surely be to God, this is going. And the opposite wing forward goes with them. And next thing, a corner forward shoots or full forward goes, and the ball goes there, and you're going, sure, how do you stop that? Because if you stay in your half-back line position, so let's say now number 10 vacates and he shoots across to join the pack, does number 7 follow him, or does he stay? If he follows, 14 or 13 is going to hop in that corner or that wing. If he stays, they'll have numbers on the far side and they overload you. You're just like, you know, and these are in-game decisions to make now. You and I are talking about this right now, and you're saying what would be the best way to get around it. But in-game, there at that second, you've got a millisecond to understand what's happening around you, because this is a pre-orchestrated move. And for you to kind of nullify a pre-orchestrated move, you have to think, you have to adapt, and you have to try to come up with a plan to nullify it. That happening in a millisecond is extremely difficult. You know, extremely difficult. So that's a Connacht move all over.
Well, does that explain why the other thing that happened a lot was a really super quick puck out taken almost before the ball is over the line from Cork, where one of the cornerbacks or a halfback has the ball and he's already in acres of space because Cork are in two minds. Do we drop back and make sure that we're not going to have one of those the long balls through that leaves us with a goal chance that we have to defend, or do we push up and make sure that we go really tight on the full forward line or the full back line? Is that where the uncertainty from Cork comes from?
Yeah, like it is. So Limerick, again, glad you asked that question. So when Limerick gets the ball poked out within 7 seconds, so when the ball passes the inline or passes, you know, goes over for a score, whatever, and Nicky gets the ball and he's poked out within 7 seconds, Limerick have a 77% chance of scoring. Just from the puck out. That's the bit. So like when he gets it out within 7 seconds, you have a 77%, well over 2/3 chance of a score coming off your own puck out, which is massive. So when Nicky's in the goals, he's saying, right, there's limited structure in the Cork defence, there's limited kind of organisation across the board. Get the ball out quick, and you know we're probably We're 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 going to get a chance here. From Cork's perspective, they've got to be super tuned. That's from the 15 right the way back. And often more times than not, like Nicky will go to because he's the left side of the goalie, he'll go out to his left side and they'll attack on the Hayes side. So how many possessions did you see Hayes get yesterday, or Barry Nash, going up that wing? And like from a Cork perspective, lads, it just takes massive amount of concentration. There was 2 or 3 puckouts yesterday when Cork were at 2s and 3s, kind of looking around themselves, and the puckout is gone.
Yeah.
Too late. You're in trouble. If you scored a point straight away, you can't dwell on that and go, "That's a lovely point. My name is in the score sheet." You need to be immediately, nearly subconsciously, competently turning and going exactly where you need to be. It has to be symmetrical. It has to be really, really symmetry. And that's what Limerick do. Limerick are fantastic at that. Now, in fairness, even if the Cork or the Limerick forwards, are a touch slow. Now, I use a touch is only a minutely percentage. They'll always have cover. Like O'Donoghue and O'Donovan are fantastic to providing link players to the forwards, but also covering that defence. So they'll assess the opportunity and say, right, we got to get back here. And Limerick will get caught the odd time. You saw yesterday for Kingston's goal. That's just the odd time to get caught. But like by the law of averages, the sum of all parts will outweigh that individual run from Kingston, and they'll snuff it out.
Is that another string in the bow for the argument for playing zonally in general, James, because you're more used to that system, and even when you're attacking, there is some remnant of a zonal defence that might exist on the pitch and will allow you to reduce the percentage of that 2/3 stat that you had there to a smaller number, because you're just used to being in a shape and you can react better to what the goalkeeper might do within those 7 seconds.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're playing against Limerick, you have to have your 3 guys in the full back line. If he's a sweeper or not, so be it. You have to have your 3 full back line. I think you have to have 4 in your half back line. And I think you have to have your 2 in midfield and 4 in your half forward line. I think you need 2 centre forwards. So what you're talking about, I think you need 1 left and right of Declan Hannon, so you can occupy Hannon. You need your 2 midfielders and your 4 half forward line, or 4 half back line. That's 13 people. Like, so you could be leaving 1 inside. You could be asking your half forward line to get up and support full forward line. So like systematically, something like that has to be done to Limerick, because they've seen the sweeper on. They've seen a +1 midfielder. They've seen kind of a packed defence, and they can get over all that. However, conceding goals against Limerick is a non-runner. It can't happen. Like you need to get them to shoot your points. Like yesterday again, they scored 32 points, and that's hard enough in itself. I thought they'd get 30 points, but then when you tack on 3 goals beside it because of runners and the creation of space inside and basically no occupancy from a Cork defender, you're not going to win. So I think you need to pack your defence, and you need to structure your defence. And if they shoot from distance, well then so be it. At least you have a chance to create bodies there and seeking run at them. But when you give them the opportunity to shoot from distance and to create space inside and create goals, you're done. You're done. Game over. Forget about it.
They also had a lot of wides yesterday, and I thought there were
17.
chances. Yeah, so that's why I don't think this is their greatest ever performance yet. We're still seeing a team who will hit a higher level of efficiency at some point in a match. Maybe the opposition will be better, but like there's more to come from them, I suppose, is my point.
Yeah, you're right. Like they hit 52 shots. Mother God, like they only another kind of interesting statistic was like Gillette only scored. I cover him to correction now. But in his own 65-yard line, he only scored 3 points from frees. I don't think he missed a free. Maybe he did. I don't think he did. But he scored 3 points from frees, and that's a sure sign that Cork lads couldn't get on the Limerick lads. If there was physical contact and it became a real battle, you'd always have your 8, 9, 10 frees, wouldn't you? You'd always see free takers with 11 points, 9 from frees. But when you see a free taker only 3 points from frees, it's a sure sign they weren't touched. So for them to score 3, probably 27, 28 from play, I mean, it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. So, and we spoke about their efficiency last week. So they had 52 shots and got 35 scores, which isn't the most efficient that they've ever done. So there's room for improvement for them as well. And so if they're improving, you have to close the gap quicker than at the rate they improve, which is frightening. It's very, very frightening, but the world we live in. And look, it is a privilege, I have to say, to be able to witness it and to watch them. I was at the final in 2008 when Kilkenny dismantled Walsh, and I thought, geez, that's the most complete performance I'll ever see. They give man the match to Brian Cody, mother of God. And then you look at yesterday's game and you think, that is just the best performance I have ever seen in my life. And can it get better? The answer is yes.
Can I ask you about Limerick's edge, James? Because they do have a level of aggression that maybe is also the most aggressive in the country right now. And for example, the Graham Mulcahy incident where he broke a hurl that was on the ground. Have you ever seen that on the pitch before?
Loads of times. Yeah, loads of times. Like, you're in the heat of the moment. Like, I caught a fella's hurl one day and threw it out over the back net. You know, it's just these things happen in the heat of the moment. Then you do it, you go, should have done that. You know what I mean? But the big difference is Graham Mulcahy was caught on camera. You know, and it was probably a needless thing to do. Let's say if the game was a bit hotter in the melting pot, I'd say, I'd give him some credit. But like, Graham is a nice fella, and I don't know what was going through his head there, to be honest. But
15 points up, James. That is serious. That is taking it to a whole new level.
Like, and that when you like, think of the hurl and the grip, that's €30. Like, these extra smashes. Like, Jesus. Probably needless, but to answer your question, there is a level of aggression, and they mix aggression with intent. So their intent is always the ball. I don't think their intent is the man, to be honest. So like, when you look at the guys tackling, it can look a bit rough-edged at times. I understand that. Like, I see that myself. But their intent is always the ball, and that's evident in the likes of, you know, Sean Finn. He's a brilliant tackler, always on the ball. Takes a lot of heat himself because guys are coming at him trying to bring him down because he's the best number 2 in the country. But he's always stick to the process and stick to what's his job. And then if you hear the likes of John Kiley talking, he's always hammering home the same message. It's about the collective, it's about our job, our performance, and all that is aimed towards, you know, success. And when you mix in the likes of aggression with quality players, who can tackle really well, and their ability to play the hand, like, so obviously hooking the block is the most obvious method of tackling you could see, but their ability to get the hand in and stop your hand from throwing the ball onto the hurl, or if you have the ball caught twice, to make you strike under pressure, is second to none. Like, they bottle you up, take your free hand so you can't get the ball out. You're actually forced to drop it, you're forced to overcarry it, or they turn you over, let's say, by taking it out of your hand. So I run out of words to say about them, because, you know, I keep looking at them year in, year out for the last number of years, saying, how do you beat them? And I just come back to the same point. Some of all parts against them, lads. Like, you have to be in a collective, and you have to be training as hard as they are with the volume of training they've done, and that's not happening anytime soon.
With the stats that you've given us, is it fair to say Cian Lynch is your hurler of the year?
Oh, do you know what? I wouldn't even nominate 2 of the lads. I wouldn't even defend them. I just say, Cian, here's the trophy. That's it. I wouldn't even give 3 names. I just say Cian Lynch, hurler of the year, and like, it was so good, give it to him next year. He's awesome stuff. That's like, I think honourable mentions, right? Because when I went through the All-Star team, like, I looked at the Sunday game team of the year, should I say, let's say, and I had a couple of disagreements in it. But like, Cian Lynch, I fundamentally agree with him 100%. But Sean Finn deserves an honourable mention, I think, to be honest. Like, he was fantastic for Limerick. I do think Seamus Flanagan deserves an honourable mention because of the way he held the ball for Limerick and the scores he got. And then beyond that, like, who else do you mention? Do you know what I mean? That's the size of it.
You'd have to give Kyle Hayes an honourable mention up until throw-in yesterday, right?
Yeah, like, he was like, again, in terms of influence, like, he's a very influential player for Limerick, that's for sure. Like, is he, a stupid question, is he as important as Sean Finn? Sean Finn is an expert defender. Kyle Hayes is a hybrid, bit of defending, bit of attacking, you know. So, like, and then Flanagan, the way he operates. Look, I could toss the coin here and pick Sean Finn today. I could toss the coin and pick Kyle Hayes tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? It's just the way I'm looking at them. This is the way I'm feeling at the minute. You know, tomorrow could be different entirely.
Do we underrate Nicky Quaid's puck-outs, given that confusion that we were talking about earlier? That comes directly from his ability to ping it anywhere.
Unbelievable. And like, I was so surprised when I was watching the Sunday game last night. I hate to mention it again, but when they were picking Eoin Murphy, and Eoin Murphy, Jesus, he knows this now when I say this, like, he's a top class goalie, probably the best goalie in history is Eoin Murphy, okay? But in terms of this year, in terms of influence and execution, Nicky Quaid is your all-star. That's it. You know, Nicky Quaid is your all-star. Like, his fingerprint on how to execute a game plan is there all over that. And like, and it's not to diminish Eoin Murphy's influence on Kilkenny, but when I look at Kilkenny puckouts, it's more of a traditional approach where let's go down to 10 or 12 horses down there and we see how that goes, you know, which I think the level of, I suppose, influence is lower than what Nicky is. Nicky is actually processing this in real time and putting the ball into a zone that Limerick will have practice or that they'll need to have get under the cosh or whatever, and he's the quarterback. So there's no point saying the game was evolved oh, the goalkeeper is now the new quarterback, etc., etc. If you don't give the person who's actually the quarterback plaudits, you know. So Nicky Quaid is my All-Star. Like Owen Murphy will get 2 or 3 more All-Stars by the time he finishes, which is fine. But Nicky Quaid deserves to be the All-Star this year, and I do think we underestimate his influence.
That's a good case, well made. We'll get killed by everybody watching if we don't ask you. Things obviously got a little bit heated. Are they stitches on your forehead or?
Well, sure. I was talking when I should have been listening. No, would you believe I was training an under-16 team at the weekend, and I got in too close, and one of them just hit me with the hurl, accidentally, of course. Don't look at me wrong, but when I came home, my wife didn't know what was going on. She thought I was in the wars again. But, yeah, no stitches, just too much skin got over. So that's, you know, under 16s. That's the danger you have nowadays, coaching lads.
I thought it was a battle scar from a hot and heavy championship match in Galway, but obviously. Oh,
I should have said that to make it sound like a better story, but I give the under 16 credit for doing it to me.
Fair play, James. Great to have you with us. Thanks a million. Cheers.
See you guys. Good to see you.
More brilliant analysis this morning from James Skehill, giving us his thoughts on what happened yesterday, how it happened, and what the future holds. I think that's the other thing that is probably quite terrifying for a lot of hurling fans from counties that aren't from Limerick. If you're from Limerick, it's like, wow, this is amazing, because it looks like it's and you should really enjoy it, because right now is the sweet spot. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Some breaking news in the world of Irish golf. Leona Maguire has been selected as a wild card by captain Katrina Matthew for the Solheim Cup. She's the first ever Irish player to play in the event. This follows a top 20 in the British Open over the weekend. So Leona Maguire's career is going from strength to strength, and we're all going to be able to tune into the Solheim Cup with Irish interest for the very first time ever. So that's fantastic news for her, and congratulations on that. We'll get you more analysis and reaction to that as well. Okay, so 9-time All-Ireland winner Tommy Walsh was covering the All-Ireland hurling final, as he always does, for OTB yesterday in Croke Park. Here he is after the event with Aisling O'Reilly on Limerick's win.
Tommy Walsh, All-Ireland hurling final day. Limerick are the champions for 2021. It was 122 to 332. What an absolute unbelievable score.
Yeah, Aisling, an amazing performance. Often when you're trying to win an All-Ireland final, you can just get over the line. It's through sheer grit, heart. It's hard to put in, you know, a performance like you're out in the back garden, but they've done it today. Pressure doesn't seem to get to this Limerick team. They were brilliant in the first half, the second half, and like trying to pick a man in the match, I say, very, very difficult. So listen, hats off to Limerick. They've got everything right today. A lot of people tipping could Cork cause an upset. The Rebel Treble are going very well underage 20s minors and could have finished it off today. But I think it was in the second quarter. I think they could have scored maybe 110 or that in that second quarter, and Limerick were just amazing. But they won it in that first half.
And we knew they were good, but did we know they were this good? They were absolutely phenomenal. As you said, everything stuck. You know, it was like glue out there when the ball came to them. It just stuck for them, and they turned, they know where each other were, telepathical at times, just unreal.
Yeah, and your first touch, like, it's grand when you're out in maybe a load of space. Ball comes to you, control it, and off you go. But they're doing these in kind of 5-10 yard passes when there's Cork lads on their back, getting in the hurl, getting in the flick. We all spoke about the speed of this these Cork players. So you're not going to get away from them too easy. But just the physical strength, I think, is what really is helping them with that shark game they're doing. But like, say, in the first probably quarter, Garrod Hegarty wasn't in the game. You know, Cian Lynch was the real man, I suppose, in the forward line, taking it to Cork. Suddenly, the first half is over and Garrod Hegarty is 2-2. Like, he really is the man for the big occasion. And with that team, it doesn't really matter. For 5 or 10 minutes, some players come into the game. Next minute, for the next 10 minutes, the lads can take a rest, and another 5 or 10 players will take over. I thought Flanagan, Peter Casey, like, I'd say he has maybe a bad injury. He seemed to go down. You spotted it. There was nobody was contesting with him at the time, which is never a good sign. He had 5 points from play got at that stage. We were wondering would he be playing in the final. So, you know, he had a tough luck. He didn't start the first final. He only came on in the final there in 2020. So he was getting his start today, and by God he delivered. And he was probably the main reason in that first half why they were so far ahead.
And I think at the very start, they dominated really the whole way through. But when Grode Hegarty got that first goal, we seen Shane Kingston then do that solo run up the wing, and he got his goal. And I sort of thought then, right, we have a game here.
Yeah, we all thought we had a game, because sometimes in the early parts, especially the underdog, they need to stay in the game. Suddenly they're gone, I think it was 1-2 or 1-1 to no score in front Limerick. And suddenly Kingston, and he should have popped that ball over the bar 9 times out of 10. But he said go on and showed the hunger, showed that they were willing to take risks today and go for it. And he absolutely buried it. They got a point as well. It was a draw match straight away. So he said, listen, this could be Cork's day. But I think, you know, the space that the Limerick full forward line had in that first half, the Limerick full back line couldn't cope with that. The sharp hook outs that we all saw at Cork were going with it all year. Would Limerick press up on it? They did, and they were able to they didn't turn them over every time, and Cork got some good scores out of it, but they were putting them under pressure. They had to earn every score. Towards Limerick seemed to be getting the scores that bit easier.
For me, that was what was most cagey. You know, once Cork had their puck out, you sort of were hardly watching, because you didn't know what was going to happen. You know, a lot of the time they turned back and go back to give it back to the goalie or go across the goal, and it was messy.
It was, and it was risky, because what you usually would happen in that instance, they go back to the goalie, and then it goes to the far side of the field where you might have a Cork lad out in the wing free, but Limerick were pressing up on him. So when Patrick Collins gave the sharp hook out to the Cork defender, once he didn't see any movement up front, he was giving it back to Collins. But when he looked up again, there was no one free. So that's why we seen, and it's so risky as well with the sheer size of this Limerick forward line. So when you give a sharp pass to one of the Cork defenders, say if it's Mark Coleman or one of these guys, he has to pass Keane Lynch. He has to pass Tom Morrissey, Grode Hegarty. Very hard to break the tackle. We often see it in training, coaches break the tackle. You could spend 15-20 minutes going through it. It's a terrible drill to do. It takes effort now, but it's worth it on the big day. But trying to break a tackle against that Limerick forward line is next near impossible. And that's why we seen it here in the media box. Every time that they got the ball and tried to play around it at the back, there was oohs and ahs from the crowd. The Cork crowd, who were so loud, and you know, they were so into the game in the semi-final, they just didn't get that chance to come into the game today and, you know, be the 16th man for Cork. Now, in fairness, we noticed earlier on in the day, you'd see it out in Jones's Road earlier on, out around the pubs, out around the streets. The last day, Cork fans, there was, you know, it was like being in Cork nearly. Towards today, Limerick, they came up and they weren't going to be, you know, outnumbered here today. So, listen, it was a great match for Limerick, but a very hard match, I suppose, to analyse, because just Limerick were so good all over the field.
They were just phenomenal. And just speaking on the physicality of them, I think that is massive out there today. You know, if Cork went into that physical battle, there was only one winner. You know, they're just really strong in that sense.
They are, and you see, it probably helped them as well. And hindsight, listen, before the game you're trying different things. Hindsight is great, it's 2020, but because they were coming out short with the puck out, the thing was they had to move fast with it then. Because if you slow the game down, that suits the bigger players, because they can get a hold of their man, they can get in tight, they can maybe gather around the guys to come in together and play as a team. Whereas when you play the ball fast, well, then you're running everywhere, you have no time to think. So the Cork, they used to play around with the ball at the back, but instead of shooting forward, now they probably weren't allowed to do it, they were giving the ball back, going across sideways, but then you're hoping that a fast ball going into the forward line, but it wasn't happening. Because Declan Hannon was staying back, maybe he was free, maybe Kyle Hayes was free a lot in the first 20 minutes over on the far side underneath the Cusack stand, and Barry Nash, as the game wore on, was free. They just could not get the ball past, and the zonal defence system of that, in the modern day, very hard to do a zonal defence. The zonal defence is definitely working for Limerick. So you're looking at, I'd love to get a player cam on the two midfielders, Darragh Donovan and Will O'Donoghue, because while they're not scoring 5, 6, 7 points a day, they're helping out that back line. They're allowing them to play the zonal defence by picking up the Cork forwards and cutting out the space.
It's possible, just to pick up on that point, that the midfielders are the most underrated hurlers. The Limerick midfielders are the most underrated hurlers in the country at the moment, because you know, they definitely help give a platform for dominance. This dominance that we're seeing, it is phenomenal. When you think it's like a 16-point All-Ireland final victory, 11 points in the semi-final, and they had to put up to them for 20 minutes in the semi-final. They only won the Munster final by 5.
Yeah, like it is. That is definitely the big reason why you would have to fear for everybody else, is that it does seem that they have an ability to flick a switch. And even at times yesterday, I felt that the switch wasn't on for the entire thing. Like you touched on the wides earlier on with James Skehill. It kind of feels that there is maybe a bit where they fill in the parts they were unhappy with yesterday next year and try and do minute 1 to minute 70.
Or if they have to as well. Like the second half, there was no pressure on to go hunting for goals. There was no pressure on, like, there was definitely a feeling in the second half. It was like, I'm going to try and get a score here, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's an all-Ireland. Everybody knew the game was over.
They did, for sure. I do think that there was, I'm not sure, like, I said at the top of the show, I do believe that Cork will win in All-Ireland soon. I'm not convinced that they were the best opponents for them yesterday. And now, in fairness, who's the second best team in the country is a debate that will rage on until there is a proper rival to this. There's no guarantee.
It turns out it's Tip.
It could be Tip. It could be Waterford, to be honest. And I wonder, obviously, Cork beat Kilkenny and they were better than Kilkenny on the day. But I just wonder if, with Brian Cody's know-how and stylistically, will Kilkenny have actually put up a better fight. I still think Limerick would have won healthily, but I don't think they would have got the hammering that Cork got yesterday. So when it comes to actually toppling Limerick, Cork might actually be outside the top 3 possible contenders at the moment. That is going to change over the next little while, for sure. But maybe it is just exacerbated by the fact that Limerick came up against an opponent yesterday that really suited them in this situation. Now the thing is, that is like very much hindsight talking, because there was absolutely no incentive for Limerick to not show up or to hold something back against Cork when they met in the Championship earlier this year. And what was it, an 8-point win? Cork looked like they'd got a lot better since then. They looked like they had wisened up quite a bit since then. And Limerick maybe had that hiccup against Tip, and he started to think, right, this could really be a tight game. They could get it down to, they could at least half that deficit, but instead it was doubled. And here we are.
Sarah Donovan is with us to give us some expert opinion on this. Sarah, how are you?
Not well. I don't want to leave the house today, to be honest.
House private, I believe, is the phrase for situations just like this. So, what happened from a Cork perspective, and how do they come back from this?
As good as Limerick were, by half-time, Cork had conceded 2-5 in turnovers to Limerick. So Cork weren't even retaining their own possession. At one stage in the first half, 3 balls went down on top of the Cork half-forward line. The boys went to catch the ball in hand and they dropped it to the ground. We praise Cork for their skill set, their first touch, and yesterday that was not evident. So it has to start there. You know, in high pressure situations, they have to be able to retain possession. Another stat was that they'd lost 50% of their possession in the first half. Crazy. Like giving that ball back to Limerick. You win it so hard, it takes so much out of you to win it, and then you just give it back. So I think from a Cork player's point of view, they can look at that game and say, we didn't perform at all. So what does 20% of performance give us? What does 40% of performance give us? And then, as you said, you know, in terms of coming back and where are they now? I think that's where they have to start. How do we get 20%? How do we get 40%? And how do we get to 100% to actually come to a level that Limerick are at?
I think that's a really good point. And so obviously Limerick put Cork under immense amount of pressure at various stages, but not just those points where Cork were losing possession. The puck out where the keeper would go short to any of the full back line, it would get fumbled and it would take a second to pick up, and all of a sudden there was pressure on, as opposed to it going straight to hand and everybody feeling confident and happy. It looked like they were nervous, and it looked like that the occasion got to them, and then on top of that you also had Limerick putting in an all-time great performance. So maybe that's the bit where they can at least point to a young team. You know, this isn't the end of a team, this is certainly the start of a team. Maybe that's the difference with the Waterford side that got annihilated. That was the end of a team. And that's the bit they're like, okay, you've got that out of your system now. The next time that's not going to happen.
Well, the next time you'd hope there'd be 80,000 fans. So if they can't cope in front of 40, how are they going to cope in front of 80? But look, that's just me being harsh this morning. But look, bar 4 of the players, everybody was born after 1997. I heard that yesterday and I was going, holy God, like that's how young this team is. And I suppose what's exciting is that the 220s winning, you know, within the last couple of weeks, the minors winning on Saturday night, that was so comprehensive. And that was a completely different style of team from Cork that we have seen in a long, long time. They mixed it. They could play long, they could play short. Their physical, like their aerial ability, plucking balls out of the sky. for fun. That's the stuff that I suppose we had forgotten about with the likes of Niall Mack and Timmy Mack and those players back in the noughties. It was nice to see that coming back into the players from Cork on Saturday night. So there'll be a couple of casualties from Sunday's game who won't see an All-Ireland final again naturally. But the beauty of it is that Cork have those 20s and minors coming through. And look, we have to put them somewhere. They have to go somewhere. So it's important that those 20s and minors get as much exposure and as quickly as they can. So next year you could see a completely new Cork setup.
You think the possibility of an overhaul is pretty much going to happen straight away?
Well, the new players have somewhere to go. You know, it's not like, as you said, we're not Waterford. You know, we aren't at the end of a life cycle, but we have all of these players that need to find a home. So we have to show them quickly where that home is.
What then happens if something like this happens to the new bunch of players in a pretty quick manner? Say, if a lot of these new players are brought in next year, and even if it's in the Munster Championship, that Limerick give them a good pasting, is there a danger at all that you need to give them a bit of protection from what might happen over the next little while, and that maybe a drip feed could be better? Or do you think it doesn't matter, they're young, they will get over whatever is coming at them in senior hurling literally over the next little while?
That's where they're going. They're going to senior hurling, so there's no point in putting cotton wool around them. That Limerick team suffered a heavy defeat in 2017 and didn't look like the hurling team that they are now, but got the exposure, became very aware what championship looked like, what other teams were built like, and then developed into the team that we saw in 2018 who took a bit of luck and now are the formidable unit they are today. But that team initially were put out to pasture and told, this is what hurling is. So I wouldn't be protecting the Cork players now. I would be exposing them at every level to what's coming.
I guess they have to be good enough to get in the team as well. That's the other side of it. So you don't want them to think, okay, we won under 20s, either of the two teams that won, that there's going to be a procession straight through, that there needs to be competition there. And that's what all the great teams have. It certainly sounds like, from what we're hearing, the training sessions at Limerick are fairly savage. And even dropping Gillette this year was a sign that actually no one is safe if Gillette's getting dropped. So that's what this Cork management team need to inculcate, is intense competition and nobody being certain of their place, while at the same time giving everybody the confidence that if they make mistakes over the next while, there's room for that and there's room for them to grow. It's a very difficult balancing act to get right.
It is, but look, we talked at the top of the segment about Cork's first touch not being up to par yesterday. Those intense competition games that Tommy Walsh will have referred to previously, where Kilkenny's A's and B's were going at each other hammer and tongs, bring up that intensity level in training games so that you get used to clinging that first ball, that first touch becoming so sharp that you don't even think about it anymore. That's why you need those 40, 50 players in Cork at this time to be able to bring each other up to par, so that when they hit Croke Park, they're not missing that first touch, they're not fumbling the ball. It's hard to create that intensity that Limerick brought yesterday, in the 6 months from January to June when you were waiting to play championship. But having 50 players with the ability to play as near to that level as you can makes you have that opportunity.
How much pressure do you feel is on this management team then next year, Sarah? Because it is a star-studded lineup that Kieran Kingston was getting credit for assembling around him. It seemed like an absence of ego to ensure that all these great names came in and to take responsibility maybe and to try and take this Cork team to the next level. But there is, as you say, going to be a new generation of players that have nowhere to go but into senior hurling. There is a pressure on nurturing that group of players to ensure that their potential is maximised.
Pat Ryan and Noel Furlong, being the All-Ireland winning managers, are obviously, next in line to take the throne, we'll say, Kieran's position. I think Kieran and Diarmid have potentially taken Cork as far as they can go. It would be unusual for a manager to step away after getting his team to an All-Ireland final, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. It is a massive commitment for a management team to stick in for, another 11 months, and they'll have to look at their personal situations again. But you shouldn't, when you're leaving a management setup, you shouldn't take the kitchen sink with you. So it shouldn't be seen as necessarily a bad thing or, a negative thing that these management might step away. They've created a template, they've laid a foundation, they've left them in a better position than they were. So if they do leave, the next manager picks up the gauntlet and he goes running with it.
I guess the thing is they probably need to be looking beyond the next 11 months as well, though, that if there's an acceptance that maybe they won't get over the line next year, there needs to be probably a 2 or 3 year plan in place.
And most comfortable in terms of that plan would possibly be Noel Furlong. You know, he has the 17s. They're a formidable bunch. Brings them through maybe, you know, into 20s and then into seniors. So maybe somebody like Noel Furlong would have to commit to 5 years to ensure that Cork would bring that potential to an All-Ireland final and get that team over the line. Is it fair for one man to take on a role for 5 years? It's an awful ask, you know, and that's why management has changed so dramatically, because you literally give your whole life for the time span.
Just one last question I have on that then is Anthony Daly in the Examiner this morning is saying that his Cork minor team is one of the best teams he's ever seen. So is there a staggering of the talent that's going to be coming through, Sarah? As in, do we actually need to wait for this minor team to be the ones that get the senior level rather than these 20s teams? Like, I mean, it's not a bad bunch to be picking from, All-Ireland champions, but are the minors actually the special bunch?
But that depends on the competition that's coming through from the other side. So we're looking at Limerick right now, and then we're asking how many All-Irelands they're potentially going to have. So maybe two more before, you know, bodies start to hurt. That level of physicality that they play with isn't sustainable. So does that mean that you're looking at those minors hitting 2021, the 20s that have beaten every team in the country now peerless and hitting, you know, an All-Ireland at 24, 25, a happy marriage between the two, and then with possibly Limerick, you know, fading in 24, 25, that Cork team coming through. Maybe we have a bit of pain ahead of us before we actually see light.
It feels that way for everybody, doesn't it?
But would it not be, is it not okay to see something spectacular on the field for a couple of years? You know,
oh, yeah.
I just think the standard that they have brought it to, you know, it's going to improve hurling more. You know, I'm not disappointed that I'm going to see this incredible Limerick team for the next couple of years.
I'm dying to see somebody put it up to them just to see how high that standard that they have can go, because I think that's the next thing that we have to really see is it looks like they've reached a level of proficiency and skill and athleticism that we've never seen or rarely ever seen. But it'd be great to see somebody who is close to them push them to see what it looks like when they get into oxygen depletion and when they start to make some mistakes, and because the thing is they are really good street brawlers as well. There was a little bit in the first 15 minutes where Cork putting it up to them and harrying them, and Limerick were like, yeah, we can do that too. Don't worry, we've got that in our locker.
Oh, look, don't question the fact that there was dark arts going on yesterday. There was hurleys being broken. There was third man tackles. There was lots of stuff on the field that went unnoticed because sometimes the narrative doesn't suit. But you're right. They can mix it, you know, with the best of them. So 20 points. I think they shot 20 points, with 20 wides. You know, yesterday. That's a team that isn't being pushed to their limits, certainly, because if you can hit 20 wides and win by 16, you're having an easy day at the office.
Yeah. So I do want to ask you about the next weekend. It's a huge weekend for the Camogie semi-finals, and that the semi-finals are in Croker, Cork against Kilkenny and Tip against Galway. It's a double header on Sunday, so it's a big occasion, a big event, and it's another slow, steady sign that there's some progress being made.
We need bums on seats, though. There was nobody in Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Saturday night. The Camogie Association needs to get their acting gear now and get bodies in Croke Park, because nothing worse than playing in an empty stadium. So it's all well and good to have these big days and be on TV, but we actually need to see women supporting women and men supporting women and having actual, real physical support for the girls on the field.
The fact that Cork and Kilkenny have a nice rivalry over the last number of years is surely going to help sell this.
I would think so, but I think Kilkenny are ahead of Cork right now. Kilkenny have had a much more solid, comprehensive championship campaign. Cork have struggled to get going, and they have shown very little star quality during their championship games. Maybe that's because the competition that they had during those games wasn't up to par, but I think Cork need a couple of weeks hard work and to be ready for Kilkenny. I think Kilkenny in a semi-final always fancy themselves against Cork.
Okay, so you think that's relatively straightforward from Kilkenny's perspective?
Not straightforward, but I would expect them to win this game.
Okay, and what about the other semi-final between Tip and Galway? How have they both been doing so far this season?
Galway will be coming into this cold. They were in a semi-final, with playing. They haven't played in three or 4 weeks. It's hard to find competitive games outside of the top 3 or 4 teams. So I don't know how much work they were able to do in the background. Tip obviously played against Waterford on Saturday, so they'll feel like they had that championship heat. I think it's Tip's to win. I'm going to back Tip on this one. It'll be a first All-Ireland final for Tip since 2006.
That'll be a big surprise, right? Because this Galway team have All-Ireland winners in their ranks and some brilliant superstar performances over recent years. They've just beaten Kilkenny 3 weeks ago, so that would be a bit of a shock, would it?
They beat Kilkenny by a point, but I think that game was an outlier because they've obviously had a score to settle against Kilkenny separate, losing the All-Ireland, losing the league final. I just think that the momentum is with Tip. So yes, it will be a surprise, but it's duly warranted. I think the Tip Galway Kilkenny narrative is laying a little thin, and I think we need some new competition in to mix it up.
You said that Kilkenny Cork, that the gap is maybe bigger than it used to be between these two counties. Does the same go for everybody else and Kilkenny at this point?
Yes, we played Kilkenny back in the league and we lost by 5. I think the Kilkenny team that's there now, we'd probably lose by 15. So it's just, as they went through the championship season, they've just been so efficient, almost Limerick-like. They've seen things that they want to improve, like Tommy Shefflin, Henry Shefflin's brother, is in there with Brian Dowling, and the things that they don't like, they change. And that's the sign of a really good team, and that's the sign of a hurling team. So it's great to have hurling minds involved in Camogie, because it's bringing up the standard, which it needs to do.
All right, Sarah, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
No problem. Thanks, guys. Go back to bed.
It's Sarah Donovan giving us her thoughts on the weekend past and the weekend to come. Very quickly, I'm going to run you through the newspaper headlines this morning. I guess we could start with otbsports.com if we have it free there at 9:01. I didn't even dream of it. Limerick's John Kiley after defending the hurling All-Ireland. Limerick star Dan Morrissey hails his teammates after the victory. Cork boss Kieran Kingston compares Limerick to the great Kilkenny and Dublin teams. And of course, Cork win the All-Ireland Minor Hurling Championship, setting up a potential Rebel treble. That was from Saturday evening. They're the headlines on it. The front page of the Examiner this morning's great picture: History Makers, Record Breakers. History Makers, Record Breakers. And it's Cian Lynch and Gillette in the background celebrating. This can go higher. That's John Kiley on the field with the Liam McCarthy, and its Treaty Stars urged to keep pushing boundaries after near perfect first half final display. Sinks Rebels joining the greats is the headline on their front page of their sports section, and it's Cian Lynch. Front page of the Irish Times, Cian Lynch, that's the actual full paper. Victory heralds golden age of hurling for Limerick. Some of the English papers very quickly for you. That coffee was empty, I promise. The Times, Lukaku's instant return, says Lukaku as he scores on his second full debut for Chelsea against Arsenal. We'll talk about that later with Mark Lawrenson. Limerick Green Machine snuffs out rebellion is the front of the sports section. Drub of the Green is the back page of the Sun. Going to be a lot of drubbings handed out by this Limerick team in the next 18 months, 2 years, until everybody gets their houses in order to give them proper competition. The age profile is so good, they could keep going. Reward enough. Ecstatic Kiley insists. Lovely hour after the demolition of Cork makes up for lack of a homecoming. And easy treat. And Green Zone. They're the two green puns that you're getting from the other tabloids this morning. Green Zone and easy treat. There's a picture of 4 of the lads with their new babies. Proud sons and daughters of Limerick. This is the only thing that could derail them. Having kids. Not getting enough sleep. They're obviously a fertile bunch. But, I don't know. What else is going to stop them? Have you got anything?
No, I'm not, I mean, you could argue that maybe the babies could already have derailed them. Maybe it would have been a much bigger win again, were it not for those babies crying in the middle of the night, Jar.
Right. One of the biggest stories to consume the Irish sports media and Irish social media over the last while has been the co-opting of Ronaldinho from the green and gold of Brazil to the green and gold of Kerry. Paul Walsh, good morning to you. How are you?
Hi lads, thanks for having me.
You've gone viral.
I have, yeah. I didn't even know I was gone viral when I was over there. It was when I came back I kind of realised.
So we're just going to play some B-roll here. This is not a lookalike, as I saw somebody suggesting that this was some kind of weird trick that you were playing on us, or that the entire Kerry Mafia were playing on us. That's the actual Ronaldinho, yeah?
That is, yeah. That's himself.
So go on, what happened?
I suppose it's a long story. He was always my childhood hero growing up, I suppose, and it wasn't because he was like the best player in the world or what he won or what he scored or anything like that. It was just kind of the way he did it. He always had a smile on his face, and you could see he was having the absolute time of his life when he was on the field. And he kind of transmitted that joy to everybody that watched him. And you could see it just playing it here, just watching him. He reminded us that sport is there to be enjoyed. And when other people were playing to win or playing to score goals or get assists, he was just kind of playing for fun. And I don't think there ever was a player like him, and I don't think there ever will be a player like him again. So basically, naturally, I would have followed him on all social media and stuff for as long as I can remember. And his brother, who was his agent, Assis, for some reason there about a year, maybe probably more than a year ago, he made a new Instagram account. And I just noticed it on the day that he made it. I noticed it. I was like, geez, there's a kind of an opportunity to get in contact here, because he only has a few hundred followers. So I sent him a follow request anyway, and he accepted it. And I can't really remember what the first few messages were, because...
You slid into his DMs, essentially.
I did, yeah, I did. I can't really remember what the first few messages were, because I was just kind of typing out my messages and throwing it into Google Translate. So I'd have to kind of go back and translate the whole thing in reverse again. But yeah, basically, I didn't kind of just explain to him that, you know, he's my childhood hero, he's my idol. You know, is there, because he's always touring the globe as an ambassador for football and stuff, so is there any chance I could meet him somewhere for a photo anytime? And a few kind of time passed in after that message, and I was like, sure, that's it. No, he's not going to reply. And I hadn't really expected anything anyway, because I just said, you know, I might as well chance it since I'm one of the first few followers here, because that page has since blown up. So it was just lucky timing, really, because I would have never been able to get in contact with him. If it was now, for instance, there wouldn't have been any hope of him even seeing the message. So some time passed anyway, and one morning I just woke up and I saw on my phone, it was a very short message from Assis. He just said, no problem. And that was kind of it then. That was kind of it, how it came to happen.
And are you at that point like, go on Assis, tell me how this is going to happen?
Are you just booking a flight?
No. So from there then, it was very hard to organise something really, because, you know, he's so busy. There was no talk of going to Rio or anything at this stage. So I was kind of, from then I started kind of chatting to him about Gaelic football. I started showing him a few videos, and he kind of got interested in that then, I'd say. And they'd never heard of the sport before, so it was nice to show him that. And yeah, it was about, I'd say, a year, probably more than a year, of kind of back and forth for anything. I still wasn't expecting to go to Rio to his house to meet him, like, or anything. But then one day, last week, I got a message from Assis. He said, Ronaldo, I'll call him Ronaldo, Ronaldo's his name. Ronaldo's in Miami, and he's going back to Rio from holidays now. He's going back to his house. That I could organise something for you to meet him there if you wanted to. And I genuinely could not believe it. Like, I thought I didn't believe it at all.
You thought you were getting catfished at that stage?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I didn't really tell anybody at this stage. I just kind of booked a flight, and I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my parents I was going to
Why not?
Because, first of all, my parents would probably be getting worried, think I was getting kidnapped or something, scammed by some lad on Instagram. And, second of all, I just didn't want to tell my friends in case it didn't happen. Oh yeah, well, nobody would believe me in the first place anyway. So sure, I was even over there, And I text some of my friends saying that, look, I'm in Ronaldinho's house, and everyone just started laughing. So,
what else can you do? It's like, I mean, it's definitely the only appropriate response is to laugh, because it's brilliant. So just go back a little bit. You booked the flights, and you presumably are a little bit anxious about whether or not this is actually going to happen yourself. So heading out there, worst case scenario, you're getting a short break in Rio. How long were you heading out to Rio for?
I hadn't booked the return flight.
Right. Okay. All right.
I booked the return flight over there.
Right.
So. Just in case something might happen or something. So I went over, and I was kind of texting him on the phone. I had a bit of a scare then over because, he sent me the address of the house and stuff. So, and he just said the only conditions were just to be alone. So I went up to the security gate anyway. There's like it's in Bar de Tijuca in South Rio. It's kind of a fairly posh area. But he lives in kind of, I suppose, a complex of, rich people's houses. And there's a security gate at the start. And I had to give him my passport and stuff because I had already given my passport to Assis. So I just had to show that I was me. But they rang the house then, and they were like, no one's after telling us you were coming, and Ronaldo was asleep. And I was like, oh my God, I'm after coming all the way from Ireland. I'm not even going to get into the house now. Because, Ronaldo, he was asleep. I don't know why, but he was asleep. So I had to wait outside the gate then for a few hours, like just with my bag sitting on the curb and wondering, am I just going to have to go home here again now? Because nobody was coming out to me. I kept asking, showing the message from Assis, but couldn't get in. But eventually, anyway, somebody got onto the housekeeper somehow, and the security guard came out for me and drove me into the house. And I just had to wait there then until he was ready. I was with his friends for a few hours, having a few beers by the pool. It was absolute madness.
And did any of them speak English? Do you speak Portuguese?
No. So one of them speak English. One of his friends spoke very good English, and a few of them were kind of not great, and then a few of them didn't. He himself had a small bit of English. He was able to hold a conversation anyway, so I could talk to him away.
Right.
At what point then do you start chatting about Gaelic games then with Ronaldinho, and at what stage does he become curious of
that? In the messages to Assis, or when I was at the house?
When you're at the house.
Well, it was kind of organised already that I'd give him the jersey. Right. I told Assis that I'd bring him over a Gaelic football jersey. So our first thing, I couldn't believe how nice he was. First thing he did, he came down the stairs, and we were there with his friends, and he came down the stairs. He came over and he gave me a hug, and I told him I was going to give him a jersey, so I presented him the jersey then. We took a few photos. Then we sat around for a while, had a few beers, and after a while then played a bit of football and stuff, and stayed there for, it was the early hours in the morning, and when I left I was there for the night. So absolute dream come true, couldn't believe it.
And as a matter of interest, when you're making contact and when you're showing him videos, is it videos of Maurice Fitz scoring the sideline to level it in Thurles? Is it some of the highlight reels that we've seen from David Clifford? Is it you playing for Kerry?
It was. I tried to find the most spectacular videos I could find, really, to showcase the game. So it was just kind of clips from YouTube and stuff. I sent him a few clips myself playing to verify that it was me. And that's how it came to happen.
Did he have any comment on the game, or was there any discussion about it?
They were actually amazed by it, but I don't know if they were just being nice, because he was genuinely the nicest person you could ever meet. But yeah, he was none of them had ever even heard of it, which I think they hadn't heard of hurling either, which is, I thought it was amazing. Like, it's terrible that most of the globe doesn't even know our sports, and we should probably be doing more to publicise them a bit more.
So you didn't get to go to a club in Rio with, would have been pretty interesting to see what the dynamic is like around Ronaldinho, Ronaldo in the club in Brazil, but his gaff sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I didn't get to see all of it now, but from what I did see, he's everything he ever wants in the house. He would never have to leave the house again if he didn't want to. He just, everything done for him. all his friends are there living with him. He's just having the time of his life.
Are you going to go back? Are you buddies now? Now that he knows you're not a catfish.
Yeah. I was talking to him about coming over to see get a football game, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. We'll have to see.
It's not like, I mean, there's going to be a big enough battle for All-Ireland tickets this year without Ronaldinho getting into the mix.
Yeah. His entourage would be the problem. He'd be grand. You could definitely spare one for him.
Yeah, he wouldn't come alone, I presume.
That's like, I mean, so Usain Bolt, Ronaldinho, both on the Kerry jersey bandwagon. It's a real thing at this point, Paul.
Yeah, it's absolute madness. I'm still trying to figure out how the whole thing happened myself, really.
Paul, good stuff. It's a great story. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
No bother, lads. Thanks.
It's Paul Walsh with the most remarkable story that we're going to hear for a while. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. We're going to take a quick break. We're back with Mark Lawrenson.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna Automower.
Automower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so...
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna Automower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
It's 15 minutes past 9. We're going to talk Premier League football with Mark Lawrenson in just a moment. A couple of quick comments for you. Shifty Lad says, watching soccer shouldn't be allowed after Championship hurling, especially Arsenal. Owen, seriously though, congratulations to both teams. Every team needs another team to bring out their best. And Pam Moore says, Cork won 3 All-Ireland titles this year and lost 1. Yeah, look, no one's crying for Cork long term. It's obviously pretty grim for that team, and you know there were tears from some of the senior members of the squad. Maybe we won't see them again in a Cork jersey, and great servants they have been over the last decade and a half in some cases, but at the same time are pretty certain that this Limerick team are going to be around, and that's going to be a brilliant bit of analysis that we get to do over the next couple of years. How do you stop them? Not so difficult to stop Manchester United, it turns out, at the weekend. Mark Lawrenson, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, boys. You?
Yeah, I mean, this time last week everybody was talking about Pogba, best player in the world, this Manchester United team going to go the whole way, and now we're like, ooh, hang on a second. Southampton looked pretty good against Manchester United.
Yeah, they were decent, because I didn't really fancy them, given the result at Everton being 1-0 up and getting done 3-1 and looking a little bit ragged at times. But he made a couple of signings. He's a good manager, isn't it, this Hasselhoetel guy? He knew when he was losing players exactly in terms of recruits who he wanted, and it would appear that he's got them. The lad they signed from Blackburn, Armstrong, actually should have scored yesterday. They could have won, couldn't they? It was a fab chance for him, and I thought he would have taken it. He seemed to rush it a little bit, but well, it's a bit Man United under Ollie, isn't it? Sort of, it can be brilliant one week or brilliant one half, and then very, very ordinary. And I'm not quite sure how he deals with that.
Is it too simplistic to point at the existence of Nemanja Matic and Fred and say, there is your problem, Manchester United?
I think it's a problem. I don't, for the life of me, understand why he plays 2 in there. McTominay as well is normally in there. In fact, he came on yesterday, didn't he? But I don't get it. You know, they've got these probably 5 or 6 really outstanding players. You don't need 2 holding players in there at all, and it's just a waste of a position for me. And I mean, obviously Pogba did well for the goal, didn't he, yesterday? And he did well first game of the season. And you just wonder, could he not come up with a formation where he's free? Because it's obvious when you give him no responsibilities or small responsibility, he just goes everywhere. It's a bit like, you know, your best player at school when you were about 11 or 12 who just kind of ran everywhere and was kind of, you know, making things happen and scoring and all those kind of things. And I think that's the way you get the best out of him. So I don't get it, but obviously that's the manager's choice.
I know Manchester City lost the opening game of the season against Spurs, and we were kind of at that point talking about where they were going to be. But I don't know if that's going to be a level of inconsistency Manchester City have over the rest of the season. We've seen them go on runs. We haven't seen Man United put a sustained title challenge together essentially since the Ferguson era. So we're very right to be cautious now about whether or not Man United are legitimate title contenders, even after only 2 games, because this is a pattern that we've seen before.
Yeah, I think it's a pattern under the manager. And, don't forget they've signed a lot of players, and they signed quite a lot of quality players, waiting for Varane as well at the moment, as everybody knows. So, yeah, it's basically, Fergie's DNA was like chuck loads of attackers on and on you go and, go and win games from not winning situations. But it seems different with Ollie. I don't know what it is with him, because, he's not even really tried just that one in there, that one holding midfield player. He doesn't even really have to be a holding midfield player anymore, because the game's really changed. I mean, you look at other teams and, all right, Arsenal, you might say Xhaka, and Liverpool really have a holding midfield player? Not really. Kante you would say at Chelsea, but you only need one. It just seems such a waste. So it remains to be seen whether they can actually be that or get that consistency.
One of the things that came out in the post-match comments was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer bemoaning the direction football is going, saying football is turning into rugby, a day after Jurgen Klopp said you may as well watch WWE instead. Football's got too physical, Mark.
Do me a favour. I mean, even Burnley were Burnley, and you know that. And, look, Van Dijk and Matip, big, strong, 6'3", 6'4" bloke. So you've got to cope with it. No, I don't know. It just seemed a little bit as though that was the kind of statement from the managers for the weekend, in terms of, oh yeah, it's getting a bit, it's getting a bit like rugby. It's this, it's that, it's whatever. No, it's the Premier League, and that's the way that it is. And I think, to be honest with you, I think we're having better games, and the referees are just letting one or two things go. And I think this is all down to COVID, obviously, as well, because the game was, or the referees were, I thought that were really, really good. And now it's fine, isn't it? It wasn't a great problem. I mean, I don't think yesterday, looking at Man United, there was the odd foul maybe that you think might have been given a foul and wasn't given a foul. But you didn't look at it and thinking the refs lost control of this and everybody was obviously fouling each other. I just didn't get that impression from watching.
Let's move on to the Liverpool performance, and the team that he's been picking has been interesting to see how the midfield in particular, obviously Gini Wijnaldum is gone. He's been a bit of a mainstay over the last couple of years, and everybody was quite curious to see exactly what was going to happen. And it turns out they have plenty of strength and depth if everybody's fit, particularly when the kids come into the team and start playing well. Just how good is Harvey Elliott?
Well, I think if he continues, sometimes it can be a big if. He'll be a really, really good player. I saw him a few times out on loan at Blackburn last season, and technically he was head and shoulders above everybody, maybe apart from Armstrong, the boy who's gone to Southampton. The great thing with him, he plays football with his head up, which is a real bonus. He sees passes, as you saw at the weekend, and he worked extremely hard defensively, did his job as well. I think he's going to be a big player. Whether he plays next week against Chelsea, I think is a completely different question, because obviously the way that Chelsea have started, and you won't want to give them much room and time, especially in midfield. So, but he's going to be a player, I'm told. His attitude is absolutely fab. He wants to stay behind at training. He wants to practice different things, etc. So he's given himself every chance of being a really, really good player. He's just a little bit kind of hesitant to say he's going to be, he's going to be this or he's going to be that, because we've seen lots of these before. But it looks like he's going to be a top player, shall we say.
It does seem as well that his certain attributes fit in quite nicely with what Jurgen Klopp wants his midfielders to do? Like, for example, obviously Naby Keita is a much better footballer perhaps, but in terms of him fitting into the system, maybe it hasn't really looked like a great fit over the last couple of years. Whereas with Harvey Elliott at the weekend, it looked like he was even doing the Jordan Henderson thing of popping up on the flanks and helping out the fullbacks and doing that sort of seamlessly. So that probably is a massive tick in his box. Yeah, no, it is. And it's all part of your education as a footballer. So if you think about it, I mean, he was predominantly on the right-hand side and he's got Trent behind him and obviously Salah in front of him. So, you know, obviously once Trent goes, you've got to sit in a little bit. But they'll get that. I mean, that's the difference now, you know, in the way that football is, that you can sit these lads down and show them when they've played, exactly how they've played, and in certain situations where you would expect them to be. I mean, you know, it was something that we never had sort of 20 years ago, and they are far more aware and wary of what's needed from them and how to play in certain situations, and sometimes when to go, when not to go, you know, when to take somebody on, when just to release the ball, etc. So it's made a big difference for them. I mean, you got the thing in, and you've got to talk about your own day, because that's all you really know, is that we just went out and sort of played. We thought we knew what we were doing. But if you had all this as well, all this kind of stuff where they can stop the VT and look at it and say, well, you know, why have you done that? You should be here, and all that kind of thing. I think we all might have been better players. It sort of feels that this Saturday evening, then, Mark, is kind of the first real significant moment in the season. I guess not least because the Liverpool centre-backs will get their first proper test this season with the way Lukaku looked yesterday. What can Liverpool do to stop him, and how good, I guess, did Lukaku look in his return to the league yesterday? Let's deal with the second thing first. It just looks so easy, although I have to say that Arsenal were abysmal. And there's one thing about Lukaku is you've almost got to let him have the ball when it comes, because if you want to fight him, you just can't. Although I think Van Dijk and Matip might have a go at it, but if you keep him facing the wrong way, then obviously that's going to be a bonus. But I mean, Arsenal just got it completely wrong. And the second thing would be to try and deny the service into him as well. But listen, you know, playing against West Ham, it's the colours that have done me in. Playing against Burnley is actually a good rehearsal for playing against Lukaku, because, you know, the two Burnley boys, the two boys up front, big, strong, and they batter into you. So it won't be much difference. It's just that this guy, Lukaku, has got far more qualities than the two Burnley boys, and also he's a goal scorer. He's got fabulous pace as well. So it's going to be it's going to be tasty, I think, Saturday evening, isn't it?
Is that Chelsea team close to their first choice now? Are we getting to the point where we think Tuchel has decided this is how I'm going to play, these are the personnel I'm going to have, and actually it's going to be harder for players to get in and out of that team? Last season there was a lot of chopping and changing. Yeah. So I think he knows his team, and you can't say that Lukaku's the final piece of the jigsaw, but he's going a long way to being so. And I think he identified that his strikers last year were a little bit lightweight, which they are, and you know, I think it's a fabulous piece of business. And you know, Lukaku and wherever he's gone, he's just got better, and he's very, very confident. Obviously, he's played in different countries now, as we know, which also helps as well. And he'll get some really, really good service at Chelsea from, you know, his Havertz and Warner and Mount and all those kind of players as well. So they've got a really, really good side, obviously. On the other side of things, you mentioned Arsenal were abysmal yesterday, especially in that first half. Mikel Arteta, after the match, I don't want to say he was maybe aloof of the fans' reaction in the stadium, but he was certainly denying any negativity in the ground when he was speaking to Sky after the match. Is that what you want to hear from your manager? Is it is it at least showing that there's a bit of fight left in him, or are you thinking at this point that it's a sign of curtains? Well, we don't know what he said to his players in the dressing room, and you know, he basically defended them. He knows that he's struggling, but just everything about Arsenal
probably in the last, 2.5 years is that this used to be fabulously well-run football club, obviously outstanding players. They were very, very difficult to beat, and they were all strong, etc. You can go back and name up on all those teams. They've lost their identity completely, and now what it is that they're an easy team to play against. Yeah, they've still got some good players, and in all honesty, the kids are as good as anybody in that team. But you get, you get like your Lacazettes and Aubameyangs, and you're looking at them and you're thinking, are you really giving everything for this football club? I'm not sure that they are, and I just wonder whether, I hate that thing where they say, oh, the manager's too nice. Maybe the manager is too lenient rather than being too nice. He's taken Odegaard in, obviously, as well, so I suppose that will help. But you look at them and you just think 6th, maybe 7th, maybe 8th, and they might have a little run at some stage. But I just think they're too easy to beat, and I don't think it takes that much to beat them as well.
When you mentioned that he could be a little bit too lenient on the players, you could also mention the fact that the board will have looked at the amount of investment that has gone into that squad over the past 2 summer windows in particular. This all paints a picture of the walls narrowing in on Mikel Arteta, and if you're going to pick a scapegoat for what's gone wrong over the last little while, well, you can't really blame the board for the investment that they've put in. It's going to come down to the manager.
Oh, it is, and it's it's results time. I mean, I don't know if they play this weekend, but it's very much. Where are they? City. Oh, good luck with that one. So it is. It's if I think they'll wait with the manager probably until 10 games and then make a decision. But they just, I don't know, when something kind of goes wrong there, it goes spectacularly wrong at Arsenal, and they've just got no spine. What's his name, the midfield player, Xhaka, was going to Roma, wasn't he? And then all of a sudden someone's decided, oh no, why don't we just give him another year at Arsenal? Xhaka's like hit and miss at Arsenal. Yes, he was good in the Euros, but he's if you look at his form playing for Arsenal, he's ordinary at best. So you I'm thinking, is the manager thinking, oh, if I let him go, he might be really good at Roma, maybe I'll just keep him. But it just doesn't sound convincing, Mikel Arteta, at all. I know he's a really, really nice bloke as well, but it doesn't help. And I think the other problem as well now is you can't tear into players. That's a massive thing. Players now are basically untouchable, and unless you're very, very kind of cute with it, like you'd say Klopp, Guardiola to a certain degree, like Fergie was, you've just got to be very, 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 very careful, because they just kind of down tools and say, well, stuff you.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about was the future of Declan Rice. There's talk that he's a bit unhappy about the amount of money that West Ham are looking for him if they were to sell him. He's got 3 years left on his deal, though, so he's not really in a particularly strong position here, Declan Rice. And it's kind of a bit like Harry Kane. He's like, oh, I want to go, but actually you've got a contract, mate. That's how life works. Well, yeah, he wasn't complaining when he signed on the dotted line, was he? I don't see him going in this transfer window, because I don't think Moisey will let him go, and he's kind of building his team somewhat around him. I think they know ultimately, West Ham, that they might have to sell him, because the offer that comes in is absolutely ridiculous, and for a homegrown player, it would be fantastic for the football club, although you'd have to get a replacement. But I think it's the classic, and he's been away with England, played in the Euros, and they'll all be nibbling at him. Some of the other players who play for the big clubs will be nibbling at him, saying, come on, Declan, come on play for us. What are you wasting your time playing for West Ham for? And all those kind of things, which has always happened. But I think he's I'm told he's a really decent lad. He's obviously a very, very good player. But I don't see him leaving West Ham shortly. So probably by Wednesday afternoon, he'll be gone.
They haven't signed anyone, West Ham, this window,
No.
Mark. Like, if you're manager of that club now, do you need to start getting your ducks in a row to A, get the maximum amount of money for him, and B, start planning who you're going to buy with the money rather than, I don't know, a Tottenham Gareth Bale money situation?
I think Moisey's planning. I think there's no doubt about it. And I know they've made loads of phone calls for all sorts of different players. It may be just at the moment they're kind of not so much the ducks in a row. They're kind of working out how much it would cost them altogether. But you see, he's in such a strong position. He signed a new contract, and he's in basically total control of the football side and everything. And he says that the two owners. Just leave him to get on with it. And he said, from that point of view, they're really, really good. And Karen Brady does all the stuff when she needs to do. But he just said, I'm just doing the football, and picking the players and obviously trying to buy the players. So he'll buy. I'm pretty sure he'll buy one or two. It's obviously just a case of who. So because they need some players. I mean, Lingard came on yesterday, didn't he?
Yeah.
Towards the end, he's not going to start at Manchester United, is he? And I think it's one of those a little bit like, if you ring up Ollie today, well, he played yesterday. He's part of my plans and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure Moisey would take him, although he did say that they got him at absolutely the right time. And I said, what do you mean? He said, he enjoys his life. I thought it was a great statement. He enjoys his life. And I said, yeah. He said, well, it was lockdown. It was COVID. He said, so basically, came in training and he went back to his apartment or his hotel and that's where he was. So I thought that was a probably modern insight into the way that some of the footballers are at the moment. But he definitely because he said he was like a breath of fresh air and he just gave them something that they obviously didn't have. And Antonio's a really, really good player, and he's big and he's strong, but he suffers from his hammies all the time, doesn't he? I think you have to be very, very careful with him in training and stuff like that. But the problem, as Moise said, is that he's such a big lad, he needs loads of work, but the problem is you give him too much work, his hammies start to twang a little bit, so leave it with him.
It's weird how tenuous these things are. Antonio's hamstrings dictate whether or not the whole season is going to be a brilliant season or a mediocre season, and that's football.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's managing, isn't it? That's that whole thing. Is it carrot or the stick? But again, going back and Borneo, in our days, it was the stick, and you'd come in at half time or full time and you weren't performing, and you got it. And you got it from Paisley Fagan and Ronnie Moran. It was like triple barrel stuff. And then you get it from, Souness and Dalglish, whatever. But it's just the way that it's changed. And it's unfortunate because so many players now, just if you shout at them, it's just head down. It's not so much down tools, but it's just like, head down. And next thing is a manager, you'll get a phone call on the Monday after the Saturday, and my player doesn't particularly like being shouted at and all that kind of rubbish. But that's the way you've just seriously got to manage it. And as Moise always says to me, he said, but the bottom line is, he said, if you crap on Saturday or Sunday, you can run them on Monday and Tuesday. So, which probably is the revenge bit.
Mark, good stuff. Thanks, William, for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Pleasure.
It's Mark Lawrenson giving us some thoughts on the weekend's football. If you want to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream, or of course you can WhatsApp us. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Now, I think we had a winner there. We do. Bernard Lawless, who put Cork in the red and Limerick in the green. Bernard entered on OTB's Instagram stories. You can get us over there, Instagram.com/offtheball, and he is the winner of our Gillette starter pack in the performance rankings this week. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Tomorrow morning from 7:30, more reaction to the All-Ireland hurling final. We'll kick off our build-up to the All-Ireland football semis this weekend. Much more as well. Right now, we're bringing you more reaction to the weekend sport. We're going to hear from Brian Kerr in a moment, who was on commentary duty for that 2-0 win for Chelsea against Arsenal. First, here's Limerick's All-Ireland winning manager John Kiley speaking with Aisling O'Reilly.
John, Kylie, you have a train to catch. I'll not keep you too long. How are you feeling? Just a phenomenal performance out there. What a team.
Yeah, it was something to behold and something to be very proud of. They hit a great flow today, I think, worked really, really hard, which we're particularly pleased with. And obviously it was something that was front and centre in terms of what we wanted to do today coming into the game. But, it's all very well working hard. When you get the ball, then what you do with it. So, that was really pleasing as well. We used the ball really well. We minded the ball well. Our accuracy was unerring. We created great space. And I think as a team, we worked for each other. We moved for each other. We supported each other. And when somebody made a mistake, somebody else came in to help out. And that was really, I suppose, the most pleasing aspect of our performance today.
Yeah, that was really evident. And just these pinpoint passes, they don't even look up to see where the lads are. They know where they're going to be. It's like telepathic at times. It's just immense to watch.
It takes great trust, in yourself to deliver the pass and in your colleague to retain it and to be there. And I suppose that trust is built up over years of hard work on the training field with Paul Kinnerk and the lads. So, we're constantly telling them to back themselves. And thankfully today they did, and they were rewarded for it.
And coming into this game, I don't think you ever would have expected 3-32, or maybe you did?
No, I'll be honest, if you asked me what the score was, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I don't look at the scoreboard at all. Listen, it's a tremendous score, right? There's no two ways about that. But, I think it was probably reflective of the performance of the guys. And, that's all they can do is play it as they see it. And to be fair, our efficiency levels, I'd say, were through the roof today. So, we had very, very few wides. And when you have very few wides, you have a chance to put up a score like that.
And for you personally, winning All-Irelands as a manager, it's stuff you probably dreamt of doing for Limerick?
I didn't even dream of it. But, we got involved to contribute what we could. And I've enjoyed my time working with the lads over the last 10, 11 years now. And I'm very fortunate to be a part of this group and to lead this group. It's a very privileged position. I give it everything I can, but ultimately it's about the group and it's about the team and it's about the performance and representing our group, on the pitch as best we possibly can any day. And I think, the honesty and the humility of our guys is something that's front and centre in every performance, and that's something I'm very proud of.
And you spoke before about your daughters and what it means to them coming out following the team, and they have their score sheets out. It's just massive for families to see this today, and obviously your own family and your wife as well. Yeah,
listen, our families invest a lot in us, in giving us the opportunity to do what we do. Not everyone would, it takes an incredible amount of time, huge sacrifices. So days like today are paybacks for that. And so, that's why you'll notice, like all our families, we got them on the pitch because we want them to be able to share in those moments. And in time when we step away from it, there'll be moments that we will treasure as families and individuals. And I suppose, listen, Limerick at the moment is just one giant hurling family. And, we had 20,000 of them here today. And please God, we'll have many more days with many more of them next year.
And some of the lads had newborn babies out there on the pitch. They look like brand newborn babies. Like, some of them look weeks old. Oh, they're brand new, I can assure you. They're only 2 and 3 weeks old. Yeah, they're very, very young. We've had a maternity ward going as well as a training, a dressing room over the last couple of weeks. So I nearly had to deliver them myself. But no, listen, it's great. It's a sign of maybe the group that are progressing along. I suppose it's a natural evolution. We've seen it with other teams in the past. But it is great that they got to share those moments, and I'm sure when those babies get older, they'll look back on those moments and say, wow, imagine having been there that day and I hadn't a clue. So yeah, they're special days. They are special days and treasured moments for the guys inside, and I'm delighted for them. So yeah, listen, our group have worked really, really hard, but the players and the manager and the backroom team, I'm just thrilled for them all, thrilled for everybody in Limerick, and sure, please God, we'll be back here again next year. And a massive relief now, you'll celebrate? We absolutely will. We're good at that too. Thanks very much. Thank you. Lovely. Yeah, thanks, Ashton.
Brian, at one stage there, I suppose it was after Reece James's goal for Chelsea in the 35th minute, which made it 2-0. It looked like Chelsea might run riot. Why do you think they didn't?
Well, I think there was a bit of doggedness from Arsenal, I suppose, in the second half. Saves from Bert Leno, bit of determination not to get a drubbing. A slight adjustment in the approach of Granit Xhaka, I'd say, who I think tried to get a bit more involved in cutting the supply into Lukaku. But overall, they were fortunate enough to get out at 2-0, really. Chelsea were so dominant. They were in control at the back. Anytime there was a bit of a threat, they always looked like they had the situation sussed and under control and dealt with. And they were dominant in the midfield area. They were able to play through the press from Arsenal. And then when they got the ball into the final third, in the first half it looked like they were going to score nearly every time they did. In the second half it still looked a bit that way, and it was often just a bit of determination on the part of some of the Arsenal defenders and the goalkeeper to get a block and get in the way. And they managed to keep the score at 2-0.
That might give Arsenal fans a bit of heart, I suppose, after 2 defeats to open this new season. And there will be a little bit more pressure on Arteta. I was just looking at this statistic there. It's his 20th defeat after 60 games in charge. It was over 110 games before Arsene Wenger suffered his 20th defeat for Arsenal. So a big difference there. But look, he had a huge amount of overhauling to do to that squad. But he has got money this summer. He's brought in a couple of big players like Ben White, Aaron Ramsdale, and Martin Odegaard as well. But he's not going to get, I suppose, his best first 11 out on the pitch maybe for 5 or 6 games into the season. So does that give him a bit of breathing space, do you think?
I think he has breathing space. I think there's more scrutiny on him now than there was previously. But it's very early in the season for that to be going on in terms of suggestion that he's under pressure. I always felt that he was given the job under slightly dubious assessment, let's say, on the basis that he was a former player who they liked, on the basis that he had worked closely with Pep Guardiola and had an influence on the success of Manchester City. But the managerial role, the being the main man, the top man, is a totally different role in so many ways. Not least having to do with the media and having to do with the scrutiny and having to do with the comment. And you see in some of his interviews now, he has started to kind of fight back a little bit at some of the criticism. And really, he shouldn't be getting involved in that. He should be concentrating on positiveness around the team and the players they signed and policy and in where they want to go and what they're like. You look at the transfer policy, it has changed dramatically. I know he was involved in the signing, or at least he must have agreed to the signing of Willian, which seemed like it's somewhat strange when they gave Willian a 2-year contract on top money. And yet they let the goalkeeper, Martinez, go to Aston Villa. And they've now bought another goalkeeper, a young goalkeeper. Martinez has been brilliant at Aston Villa, I have to say. He was their second choice. They played him in some competitions. They obviously judged he wasn't good enough. They let him go. I think they only got 20 million for him. But now they've spent 25 million to get another goalkeeper who probably isn't as good as Martinez based on what I've seen so far. So the transfer policy seems to be signed. We saw Tavares, if that's the right name. Yeah. I know they were a band in the past. You probably sing some of the songs for me now, Stephen. But Tavares, the full-back, is signed, young player from Portugal. Martinelli is a young player coming into the team. Smith Rowe, young player coming into the team. Odegaard, another under-23 player. Ramsdale, I mentioned, another under-23 player. But it seems to be, the policy seems to be go for young players with potential that will retain the sell-on value in the future. What I'd say about that, that's okay as a policy, but you've got to sign players that are going to help you win the matches while that transition phase is going on, where they are in that phase, but they're finding it difficult to get some of them off the books. The ones that are, like, they've got Ozil, they got rid of Ozil. They haven't got rid of an awful lot. They got rid of David Luiz, right? He still hasn't got a club. Guendouzi, who was a player I kind of liked, but obviously he dirtied his bib in his behaviour, and they made an example of him, as he did last year with Aubameyang, because when he was late for the match with Spurs, and they won the match, but then they got nothing out of Aubameyang for the rest of the season out of him. So, you know, it's maybe part of learning for the manager. He wants to have certain principles. He wants to stamp down on fellas maybe not completely towing the line and being totally professional. But you've also got to be careful in doing it that the team is winning games. And last season was a disastrous season. They finished 8th. They had their eyes on the prize of the Europa League and trying to win that. They get to the semi-final. They get beaten by Villarreal, a team of infinitely smaller resources and quality, I would say. And they end up getting nothing out of the season, really, bar the emergence of some of the young players like Bukayo Saka and Emil Smith-Rowe, a bit of Eddie Nketiah, who seems to be out of the picture at the moment as well. Kieran Tierney at left back was a real plus on last season for them. But they're certainly in a stage of being betwixt and between, wanting to move players on, wanting to sign new players, wanting to get players that are good enough. But right now, the players they've signed don't look like they're going to make an immediate impact on results. Pepe was another one. Nothing to do with Arteta. Huge amount of money spent on him.
He's never really taken off, has he? 75 million.
No, had a great season at Lille where he scored, I think, 26 goals in the league season. But at Arsenal he got 5, and now he's got 10 last season. He's a bit an in and out player, not consistent.
Half of those are penalties as well last season. So you know,
I didn't realise that was the case. But there you go. So you know, it's not easy to do that change and transition. But if Arsenal have spent an awful lot of money in the short term on players who may not get them results in the short term, and some of those players might be for Arteta if he hangs in and they stick with him, and the season change. I mean, they won the last 5 games last season, but they were, again, with the exception of beating Chelsea, they were fairly weak opposition. You're hoping they'll roll on. But I still go back to, there's a lot of difficulties around the COVID thing and for managers and getting a settled team and getting all the players on the pitch and getting the balance of what you want. But looked at the manager today and they said, he's going, this is tough going. And it shouldn't have been a tough start for them. If they beaten Brentford, they got away with today. And people say, well, look, you know, we lost 7 home matches this year. Chelsea in great form. They're going to be in the running for the league. Get away with that as long as you show a bit of fight. But when you lose 2 and the next one is Man City, then the scrutiny and the criticism is multiplied a bit, and that's how it's going to be until they get a few results. Before
I ask you about Chelsea, do you think that Arsenal should have maybe been given a bit of grace by the Premier League, perhaps even had today postponed, because they were without Lacazette, who is still recovering from COVID. They lost Ben White. There's obviously a bit of an outbreak there in the squad. So should they, like Man City last season, been given maybe a postponement this weekend?
Well, we don't know what's going on around that, Stephen, but certainly there seemed to be a feeling that last week we don't know all the players exactly who were affected, but we saw Lacazette and Aubameyang weren't involved. You know, I'm wondering about Willian. Is that the case with him, for instance? He's not involved. There's a few more. Gabriel is supposed to be injured. Is it COVID or is it an injury with him? One of the centre halves, they badly need someone coming in at centre half. So I don't know the answer to that, but it looks like they have had an outbreak. I mean, Ben White, £50 million, based on how he did, or €50 million, based on what he did at Brighton last year. It's a huge investment. Another young player with sell-on value, provided he does his stuff. But you know, that's why I'm inclined to give all the managers and all the clubs the benefit of the doubt. It's obviously been an extraordinary time to try and manage a football team and get your best players out on the pitch. And I'm inclined not to be too critical of managers' decisions under these circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every season it happens, doesn't it? People are rushing to judgment after 1 or 2 games, but I think it is fair to say that Chelsea now, with Romelu Lukaku back at the club, are going to be real title contenders this season. We know they got off to a slow start in the first half of last season under Frank Lampard, but Thomas Tuchel really turned things around, won the club's second Champions League, and it looks like now with Lukaku in there, they could be adding another Premier League title to that trophy cabinet.
Well, Well, they've been off now a bit for 4 years, isn't it, since Antonio Conte won it, and you know, they've been a good bit off at times too. Very good. And the second half of last season was much better, but they look under this manager and with this group of players. I mean, it's interesting that Rudiger looked like a player who wasn't particularly wanted last year by Frank Lampard at times. Andreas Christensen, similarly. Yeah. Azpilicueta, similarly, weren't in the team regularly.
Alonso, even there was talk of Alonso perhaps going in the summer. Yeah,
and they are very much part of the package now. I think he picked his best team for the Champions League final. I look at that and say that was his best team with Thiago Silva started with Rudiger and Azpilicueta as the centre backs, and Chilwell and Reece James as the full backs, Kante and Jorginho in the middle of the pitch. Now, Christensen come on after about half an hour in the Champions League final, was no bother.
He was brilliant.
Looked brilliant, was part of that. But, you know, I remember in advance of it thinking Hudson-Odoi might play based on the previous games, performance against Real Madrid in the semi-final. But looked at it and said, well, that's his best team to start in the final. Havertz and Mount and Werner up front. So they're all still there. And Alonso was playing these 2 games, has played very well, scored brilliant free kick last, has started. Chilwell hasn't started yet. He's waiting on the bench to get a go. Young Chalobah played the first 2 games. I'm talking about the Villarreal match when they won the Super Cup and the league match. Brilliant last week, got a great goal. So now he's got Kurt Zouma. He's got more for those 3 centre back positions. He's got options in the wing back positions. He's got Lukaku coming in, and I spoke about it in the commentary about the 4 or 5 players that could play off Lukaku or just behind in those number 10 position. I nearly
3 holding midfielders as well: Kovacic, Kante,
any two of those 3,
and Jorginho. Yeah.
So,
Brian, you have to give huge credit to Tuchel, whatever about his tactical master plan and how he gets his team to play, but to keep all those players happy. They all seem to be happy to stay at Chelsea now to play for the coach, because they certainly weren't under Frank Lampard.
Well, they were where we went under Frank Lampard. We don't really know that. Nobody has left and nobody has been outspoken. No one has said that. But you know, the key to keep players happy is, are they getting the game? Everyone wants to play. Everyone wants to start in the match. Some players later in their career can end up saying, well, I'm happy to be the impact sub like Kevin McMenamin and whatever. Yeah. Or Giroud will come on and maybe help me get... Nobody really wants to be that. They want to go off and play somewhere. And that's how the game is. Now, because of the number of competitions Chelsea were still going in late on, they were still going in the FA Cup. They were going in the Champions League. They were trying to get to the top 4 in the Premier League, because they were a good bit off at one stage. I think they were down to 7th. But anyway, they made it in the end. But that meant that there was a fair bit of rotation, trying to keep the players fresh with the games being so compressed. And players are happy once they know that they're getting a fair crack at the whip. And I think back in the Champions League final, and he picked the team, the best team. I'm sure there was players felt, I thought I was going to start. Christensen, I had him down to start him. I picked my 11. I thought Christensen was going to start. And I thought Hudson-Odoi might start. But by the end of the match, I think he used the 4 or 5 subs in the game late on. Kovacic certainly come on. Ziyech come on. Pulisic come on. Players got on the pitch. They looked at the celebration at the match. They didn't look like there was any moany faces. They won. They won the Champions League. They were getting big bonuses. A lot of them got on the pitch, so they had no real gripe. And he's picking them on form. He's picking them on what they've done in the game, and that's always the answer when players come and say, "Why am I not playing?" Because your man played better than you, and I'm picking him, and we won the match. Funny, when I was managing, I used to hope that players didn't come to me and ask me why they weren't playing before the match, after I picked the team. Because I wanted us to play the match And then I used to find fellas wouldn't come to me and ask me because we won the match. The answer was, the reason you're not playing is because the 11 I picked, that was the best 11 to win today's match. Now, I can give you an explanation as to why I thought that was the best 11, but I often thought that was that was the answer. There we play. And for Tuchel, that's often the answer. I don't know if anyone likes it. The players that I left out, whether they like that attitude. But it was one that was used to in my head, that sometimes it was kind of difficult to explain all the permutations and things that went through your head about why you felt that team that day was the team, you know.
Cork, they're obviously not the performance they wanted here today. You know, they are a brilliant hurling team. They've serious youth on their side, and we've seen the 20s and the minors getting the wins during the week as well. You know, there is a lot of positives there.
There is, and like coming into this game, I was quietly confident for Cork. I thought just everyone was they were coming in as underdogs, but they were hurling so well. There's so many players hurling so well. They didn't just stumble into the final. They won the under-20s, they won the minors. I just thought they were on the crest of a wave, and sometimes when that happens, and Limerick were such raging hot favourites, I was quietly confident that they could put one over Limerick today. But listen, it just wasn't to be. I think they just got caught out. Maybe they left so much space inside in their full back line. It was impossible. No one would have defended against that today. To do that, they would have had to mark all the Limerick players out the field, Tom Morrissey, Hegarty and all the lads, so that the ball going in was just kind of 50-50. But they weren't, so that the space left there, and they gave the Limerick players the chance to look up and pick the spots to give it in, and it was never going to work. So I just thought maybe, you know, the next day they'll probably have to learn from that. There's a lot going for them. They're young. They're all only 20, 21, 22. You know, Patrick Horgan is probably the eldest, and he still has the speed. So listen, they'll be back again, and their underage is showing that there are plenty of players coming.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face